Suddenly, the young man awakens in an unfamiliar world, a man watching him closely. Confused and dazed, his gaze reveals his astonishment. Crouched on the ground, he remains still, showing the depth of his mental confusion. The quiet, peaceful village around him is unlike anything he had known. The man beside him wonders how to start the conversation. First, he asks the boy to listen carefully. Ignoring him, the boy begins to remove his clothes, feeling something strange in his body. That world is Ira, filled with swords, magic, and all manner of monsters and demons. Because of these creatures, the world has become a war zone where survival is constant. The greedy land summons people from other worlds across all dimensions. Xenovis, the city of beginning, was the first place reached by those summoned. It is here that he opened his eyes, having learned no magic or martial arts. To the warrior, the boy is truly classless. The protagonist introduces himself as Lee Sunman, while his new companion offers him food. Hungry, the young man thanks the stranger for his kindness. As they walk, he receives a bit of drink. Quickly, he gulps down the contents of the canteen, showing gratitude for the help. Yet he notices something unusual in the taste. Suddenly he empties his mouth, spitting the liquid out. Someone realizes it was goblin paralytic poison and spits it into the man's eyes. Diluted in water, the poison changes taste but retains a distinct, fishy smell. Summon understands the man intended to deceive him and sell him as a slave. Revealing his powers, the old warrior realizes the boy is not merely a summoned. Behind his fragile appearance lies an experienced soul, even without a class. Summon strikes his opponent in the stomach. During the fight, the young man reveals he has 13 years of experience. Suddenly, he grabs a dagger and lunges, striking the opponent's throat. In Ira, the main rule is not to trust others. The world is nothing but trash. With little money, someone must consider their next steps. Even a simple dagger is better than nothing. But his body is not yet ready. His body reverts to its original state, without muscles or scars. The boy returns 13 years into the past, to the moment he was first summoned to Ira. His gaze reflects his attempt to understand the reason for his regression. His name is Lee Sunman, a veteran C-rank mercenary, 27 years old, who had lived an ordinary, low-class life. Lacking special talents, background, or unique skills, he never reached the top. Walking a fine line, he discovers an unknown dungeon. After much suffering, he finds a chest, hoping for treasure. Inside, there is only a simple stone. Unsure how to use it, he takes the item and leaves. Before his death, a message reveals he will return 13 years into the past. The stone is a regression stone, returning its bearer to the past. At that moment, he reflects on his situation and opens the status window. Disappointment hits. Nothing has changed despite his expectations. Still, he retains the memories of his 13 years in Ira, recalling the hardships endured. Walking, he arrives at a healthy bone realignment clinic and realizes he must make changes. In Ira, many summoned exist: mages, martial artists, and the most common, the classless. Though capable of learning anything, classless individuals are the weakest, dying before mastering anything in the wild environment of the areas. The summoned has lived as a C-rank mercenary, suffering humiliation for 13 years. In the end, he dies having lived poorly, with no grand achievements. An old man observes the young boy seeking skeletal remodeling. Knowing the opportunities he missed, the boy is determined to become stronger this time. With the plan in motion, he obtains a low-rank martial skeleton and the celestial cultivation technique. Even without skills or resources, Lee notices changes in his body as he leaves the establishment. He secures one of the 3 chances to improve his status, already available 13 years ago. The martial skeleton modifies his body, making martial arts easier to learn. He is the first incentivist to undergo the procedure with an acupuncturist who created artificial skeletons. Conditions for skeletal remodeling require being classless and skillless. Past summons could not receive it after learning skills. In this new life, it is possible. Knowing the doctor will soon die, few classless individuals could access this opportunity. He also acquires the true celestial cultivation technique, allowing the accumulation of internal energy, the foundation of cultivation. The boy knows of a first-class technique hidden in a small library in Sinnes. The owner, unaware of its value, sells it cheaply. Among the 3 chances he missed in his past life, he acquires 2 in a single day. The third will be the prize for the Colosseum winner, opening a year later. His standards are low, as only the classless can participate. It is entirely possible to improve during that year. Next, he needs money for accommodation, so he decides to hunt monsters. Tired, the man pays no attention to the boy. Some men observe armor and items on the ground. With shining eyes, he declares his intent to buy some. Confused, the vendor asks if the boy has enough money, which he would need at least 300,000 a year to afford everything. Trying credit fails, and he is thrown out. The vendor notices the boy's determination. Some offer their clothes as payment, claiming they are high-quality garments from a developed dimension. The vendor laughs. Summon grows irritated, but remains determined. The vendor refuses to lower prices because the boy is classless, claiming the boy has no shame. Saying he doesn't need the clothes, he allows credit. The vendor respects the boy's attitude. Fighting desperately, despite his youth, the vendor foresees the boy will survive and become a loyal customer. With his new armor, the young man gazes at the dark forest, satisfied with his purchase despite spending all he had. He feels fortunate in his new life. Walking cautiously, the boy recalls being defenseless 13 years ago. The system reports acquisitions, lightning step, a strong skeleton, and destruction palm. As the sun sets, something moves in the forest. A goblin tries to hide, but Lee Sunman uses the soul-chasing sword technique. With a single strike, the spear pierces the goblin's face. 1 shot, 1 kill. Afterwards, he attempts to rest, but feels strong pain in his hand. Using the spear with his untrained left hand risks burns. Smiling, he decides to build calluses through training. Even in a useless regression, it is a new beginning. In a dark place, red smoke surrounds a mysterious young man using magic. Some return to the simple lodging they've stayed at since being summoned. Entering, he is greeted by Jacuzzi, the middle-aged innkeeper carrying a newly acquired dimensional pouch to pay lodging fees. Jack finds it unusual for a classless to have such an item, but accepts the price. Inspecting goblin teeth and fluids, he allows the boy to stay 2 more days, impressed by his persistence. Even without talent, he could arrive in Sinnes with no skills or class. For 2 weeks, he survives by daily hunting, returning with valuables to cover his stay. Jack observes that a normal, classless person could not do the same, claiming the boy could become someone like Zine. Tired, the young man goes upstairs, reflecting on Jack's words. He is determined to live differently, carrying techniques from his past life. Even restarting from scratch, he knows he cannot surpass others with second-rate skills. Only the celestial cultivation technique offers hope. He decides to focus on mastering it. The next morning, he prepares to go out, but is stopped by Lula, the innkeeper's daughter. Concerned, she asks why he risks his life in the forest daily instead of taking safer work. The boy's choice is hunting to earn money. Still, Lula considers him foolish and suggests he work at the inn. Concerned, she offers him a job, knowing her father favors the boy, but chores are not his thing. Little understands his preference for risk over security. Turning away, he promises to return for dinner. In his previous life, he compromised. Now he vows to achieve what he deserves. Willing to do anything, he sets out for another hunt as the afternoon bell rings. That sound signaled the arrival of a new summon. Watching from a distance, he recognized the energy forming. It was a child, apparently the same age as Summon. Just like him, the child looked vulnerable, an easy target for scammers and opportunists. Men were already trying to persuade the Summon, using the same bottle that had been used on the protagonist. For a moment, he wondered if he should help children, but he preferred not to get involved in such matters. As he turned his back, he bumped into someone standing beside him. Looking up, he saw just how huge the man was. Before he could act, he was caught in a trap and accused of breaking a bandit's collarbone. Angry, the giant punched him in the face. The young man fell to the ground, having no time to react to the sudden blow. The commotion drew curious glances from people nearby. Trying to divert the citizens' attention, the attacker claimed the boy had broken his bone and insisted that he should pay in the same way. Even confused, the townspeople turned their backs and walked away. Determined, Hyung decided he would break the boy's collarbone in revenge. Furious, someone realized that all those men were part of the same group. The bandit in front of him was a third-rate martial artist, barely able to tell the difference between a rib and a collarbone. Martial artists were distinguished by levels, and the third level was reached only with minor mastery. Some men had just progressed and hadn't even reached the third category yet. The boy would need help to win the fight, but he knew the people of Sinis were heartless and wouldn't offer assistance. Realizing the child would be sold as a slave, he intervened, asking the boy not to drink the poison. The child was confused, but he no longer brought the canteen to his mouth. Confident, he wanted the help of the boy, who seemed to know some combat techniques appearing to resemble those from Miram. At that moment, the drink spilled completely on the ground. Standing before him, Hyung Nim said the protagonist would be perfect for nobles with strange tastes. Bending his knee, he tried to strike the boy with a powerful blow. But the young man knew he couldn't allow things to end that way. Determined, he used the lightning step technique to confront his enemy. His second move was the strong exoskeleton steel break skill, leaving the opponent completely confused. With one strike, he hit the attacker's rib. From a distance, the companions observed the battle carefully. His destruction palm and other techniques were effective, but the opponent's body seemed absurdly resistant. The two paused for a moment to regain their strength. Despite his experience, he was still far from being a match for higher-level martial artists. Hyung did not feel intimidated by the young man's abilities. Considering the protagonist's weight and strength, he wouldn't be able to endure the fight for long. Meanwhile, the other henchman commented that the commotion would surely attract the guards. Determined, Lee Summon moved in for his next strike. From afar, the child watched the battle attentively. The fight forced him to use his spear, as he wouldn't stand a chance with his bare hands. Without wasting any time, he grabbed his spear with complete determination. Suddenly, the child appeared at his side, asking him to repeat a phrase he had said earlier. Confused, the protagonist didn't understand the situation. Asking the child to wait 1 second, he tried to defend himself from the imminent danger. However, the boy stopped the giant's hand with a single touch. Using his powers, he launched Kungam as far as he could. "I can't believe those insects of mine challenged you so rudely," he thought. The bandit fell atop a pile of wounded bodies on the ground. The palm strike, infused with internal energy, was neither a first-class nor second-class technique. Lee Summon realized that standing beside him was a peak martial artist, despite being the same age. After the fight, Summon was surprised. The boy might be Wei Hoyan, the little celestial demon. The demon cult had representatives from unorthodox origins who worshipped power itself. The strongest in the sect became the leader, called the Celestial Demon, and his son was referred to as the Young Master. That summoned one was the little celestial demon Hoyan. Coming from an ancient era, he was the same age as Summon, but there was a massive gap between them. At that moment, the protagonist recognized the person who had made a name for himself in Arya. Although he knew who it was, Wei Hoyan formally introduced himself to the protagonist. The two spoke in the room, and Li Summon shared his name. The boy revealed extremely interesting things, such as Yura being a completely different world with no demon cult. Laughing at the situation, the boy seemed to be enjoying himself, though deep down, his gaze revealed a certain concern. Remembering the fight in the square, Wei Hoyan asked what the boy had been yelling at him about. Not understanding the reason for the question, he replied that he had warned him not to drink water containing goblin paralytic poison. However, the little celestial demon did not accept being spoken to so informally. Lowering his body, he asked for forgiveness, saying he didn't know he was addressing the young master. Inside, Li Summon couldn't believe he was bowing to a 13-year-old. Smiling, Wei Hoyan showed satisfaction. Pointing at him, he said the boy had used martial arts earlier and called his techniques trash, saying the way he fought was ridiculous and that he didn't understand where he had learned those techniques. The protagonist didn't understand Wei Hoyan's words or his goals with that conversation, but surprisingly, instead of scorning him, he offered help, saying he would teach him martial arts. Standing in his room, the young man remained silent. Confident, the little demon claimed that with his techniques, he would improve very quickly. However, there was a single condition for Li Summon. Stunned, the young man feared that condition. The little celestial demon wanted him to become his friend. Sweating cold, Summon didn't know what to say and was extremely confused by the situation. Since a very young age, the celestial demon Wei Hoyan had desired a friend. His father didn't understand where that desire came from, but little Wei Hoyan had learned from a book that having a friend allows one to overcome anything. His father said that only applied to ordinary people, which wasn't his case. The leader of the demon cult, celestial demon Ouija Hack, had stated that his son would rule the myriad demons without a friend. Wei Hoyan was always surrounded by intense training and rigorous preparation. His father, authoritarian and inflexible, viewed any desire for human connection as weakness. For practical training, 50 people were annihilated by a 10-year-old child. Being Ouija Hack's son, such feats were unsurprising. Even so, his expression didn't show much dissatisfaction. Unexpectedly, his desire for a friend came true when he saw Li Summon, a man returned from time. Born as the heir, high expectations had always been placed on the boy, who had begun training early. Deprived of friendships during his childhood due to strict training, he never had time to meet people. Despite the unusual circumstances, the two made a friendship pact. Wei Hoyan showed all his happiness upon realizing he had a new friend, Li Summon. Even at nearly 28 years old, the regressor became friends with a 13-year-old child. Hoyan would teach Summon the mystic arts of the Violet Dawn, a special technique of the demon sect with unique characteristics. Its internal energy appeared in a violet hue. Confused, the boy thought he was going to learn demon arts from Wei Hoyan. Now that they were friends, the little celestial demon said the young man could speak to him informally. As he changed his tone of voice, the boy's expression revealed complete satisfaction. The demon arts could only be practiced by the cult leader, so he would learn the other techniques. While walking through the forest, the young man realized that some time had already passed. Wei Hoyan himself had taught him the mystic arts of the Violet Dawn for an entire month. Even though he had defeated several monsters at once, his goal was still to become stronger. His current level was between the third and second category, which was progress compared to his previous life. Although his progress was evident, Hoyan's critical gaze never failed to emphasize his flaws, which pushed him even further. In the middle of the forest, Li Summon paused for a moment, surveying the scene around him. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the sunlight barely pierced through the dense canopy overhead. He thought about the spoils of his recent victories, the coins, the the trophies of defeated monsters, but his thoughts were interrupted by a rustling noise among the trees. From the shadows, a massive figure emerged, its form hulking and menacing. The boy's heart skipped a beat. The creature's eyes glinted with malice, and its gnarled claws flexed in anticipation. If he hadn't reacted instantly, he would already have been crushed under its sheer strength. His instincts screamed at him, and in the blink of an eye, he dodged the creature's initial strike. Squinting through the dim light, he realized with a shudder that the monster was an orc, a terrifying and powerful being whose appearance alone could instill fear in even seasoned warriors. His eyes darted to the left and then the right. He was completely alone. The forest offered no allies, no safety, and no backup. This fight was his, and his alone. Clenching his spear tightly, he lunged forward with precision, piercing the creature's chest. The impact sent a shiver up his arms, and for a moment he feared the weapon might not hold. But soon, the orc staggered back, a hole gaping in its torso. Leaping forward, Lee's summon pressed his advantage, finishing the fight with a swift, calculated strike. He landed gracefully, exhaling slowly as he surveyed the fallen monster. The victory was his, though he could not suppress the nagging thought of Hoyan's constant comparisons and critiques. Even as he wiped the sweat from his brow, he studied the orc carefully. Its presence in this forest was anomalous. These monsters did not typically inhabit this territory. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice, calm, confident, and observant. Despite your age, you are already a formidable warrior. Startled, Lee's summon looked up. A man approached cautiously, his eyes keen and calculating. This was Wu Hian, once known throughout the Central District as the Orchid-Destroying Sword. His reputation preceded him, but the boy remained cautious. Wu Hian gestured toward the fallen orc. I've been tracking this creature. It's been causing chaos in this area. As the city skies darkened with clouds, Lee Summon's attention was drawn to the companions nearby. A small monkey, Du Sangriang, whispered, "Isn't he too young to be facing such foes?" Yet Wu Hian, who had witnessed the battle firsthand, affirmed, "I've seen his skills. He's exceptional." Wang Pei, the dagger-wielding warrior of the Black Rain, nodded in agreement, and then Rainier, a young mage from Vela's magic school, introduced herself. Curiosity rippled through the group. The region had recently become a hub of conflict. A faction of orcs had established a new village, invading nearby human settlements and killing wandering adventurers. The guild had offered a reward of 20 million earned to eliminate the threat, to be equally divided among 5 participants. Lee Summon calculated the split in his head. Around 7 million for him, a substantial sum. Yet he hesitated, wary of the reliability of his companions. One Hurrium watched him intently, awaiting his decision. After a moment's contemplation, Lee Summon accepted the mission. Wu Hian's face softened with approval. With you, this will be far easier. Despite his gratitude, the young man observed the so-called pack mules accompanying the group, 2 men without rank or status, responsible solely for carrying equipment. When they recognized Lee Summon's origin from Murm, they bowed politely, accepting their role in the expedition. Rainier, having purchased some apples along the way, shared them with the group as they trekked toward the orc village. They estimated the enemy force to number around 50, though only 30 were likely to engage directly. Du Sangriang, confident in the orcs' slow reflexes and limited intelligence, formulated a plan to divide the group strategically. Lee Summon would fight alongside the experienced swordsman while the others prepared another front. The core strategy was simple but effective. Lure the orcs from their village, then use divide and conquer tactics. Rainier employed wind magic to carry their scent, exploiting the orcs' territorial instincts. The little warrior and Wu Hian were assigned to light a signal, drawing the creatures into the trap. The plan, though straightforward, required precision and coordination. Lee Summon knew it would have been more efficient to set a proper trap, but the resources and time constraints made this approach practical. As they neared the forest edge, the first group advanced with caution. Brass, one of the pack mules, struggled under the weight of the gear. Lee Summon observed his effort, recalling his own past life's hardships. Curious, he asked for the man's name. Brass, the man replied, voice tinged with apprehension. The boy sensed his fear and gave him a choice: stay or flee. Brass, aware of the guild's potential punishment, chose to stay. Upon spotting the village, the group observed the stakes and patrols, waiting for the opportune moment. Lee Summon rummaged in his dimensional pouch, producing water to mix with mud. He coded himself and instructed the others to do the same, masking their scent. When the signal flare was finally activated, 13 orcs were lured out, each eliminated with a deadly precision. The boy's spearsmanship was flawless. Each strike was calculated, each movement fluid. Yet even amidst the chaos, he noticed Brass's vulnerability. Despite no formal friendship, he felt compelled to protect him. There was no camaraderie, only mutual recognition of shared struggle. The orcs pressed on, but Lee Summon's mastery of the soul-chasing spear technique, lightning split strike form, decimated their ranks. Wuhian fought alongside him relentlessly, while a larger creature threatened Brass. Lee Summon intervened, saving the man with precise strikes. The battlefield was littered with bodies, proof of their skill and strategy. The leader of the orcs cut off ears as evidence for the guild. Despite success, tragedy struck. Brass fell, sacrificing himself to aid the boy. The loss weighed heavily on Lee Summon's heart. Back at the guild, Lee Summon collected the reward, though his spirit remained burdened. Wei Hoyan confronted him, sensing a hidden truth. The boy revealed the recent fight against the second-rate martial artist and the difficult choices he had made. Hoyan's intuition, sharpened by years of experience, suspected there was more beneath the surface. Despite her probing, Lee Summon remained guarded, acknowledging that everyone had secrets. In the days that followed, Wei Hoyan shared her internal energy with him, a significant portion, 20%, enough to bolster his training in the Violet Dawn arts. Lee Summon absorbed the energy cautiously, his body vibrating under the influx of power. Through rigorous practice, he began mastering techniques that once seemed impossible. Over the course of a month, Hoyan taught him the supreme spear technique of the Nine Heavens, blending it with his existing skills. The bond between them deepened, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Hoyan revealed her own secret. She was a girl, forced to live as a boy to adhere to her father's expectations. Lee Summon, in turn, confessed that he was a regressor, carrying memories and knowledge of a past life. Through honesty and shared struggle, their friendship solidified. Hoyan's teachings pushed Lee Summon beyond his limits, and he began to understand the true nature of internal energy, martial arts, and camaraderie. By the time she prepared to depart, Lee Summon was ready, not just with skill, but with a renewed understanding of his place in the world and the potential of his journey ahead. Confident, she showed no trace of fatigue as she ate. Meanwhile, her opponent could do nothing. Refusing to give up, he attacked again with his spear, but she blocked every strike with ease, stopping each blow with her right hand. One by one, 19 attacks came, and with none landing, he realized he had lost. Yet the final strike, with the spear's tip close to her face, caught him off guard. Smiling, he thought he had succeeded, but the girl vanished and appeared behind him, proving his defeat. Still, Hoyan praised him, acknowledging her friend's potential. With the internal energy he now carried, Summon's martial arts were born. He even sensed presence before, a talent reserved for the gifted. She believed in him so much that she said his weapon would one day become extraordinary, seeing 10 years into the future. The fight had been easy, yet she was satisfied with his progress. They agreed to meet again in 10 years. A month ago, she asked his life goal, but he remained unsure. She wanted him to become her final goal. Humans need objectives, or life drifts aimlessly. She challenged him to return in 10 years strong enough to defeat her. Summon hesitated, claiming he lacked talent. Unlike her, a genius who had taken many elixirs, their starting points were different. He felt swallowed by his old inferiority from a past life. Hoyen openly expressed her frustration, hating that mindset. Fury lit the protagonist's eyes. Summon had nothing. Summoned to Ira, with empty hands and no talent. He had risked life fighting in mud, living lowly until death. Hoyen pointed out he had learned mystical arts and become a second-rate warrior in just 3 months. Even with a second chance, he refused to aim high, to dream, or to set goals. Every attempt by her to open his eyes only made him angrier. Hoyen was shocked at his rage. The protagonist couldn't believe he was being lectured by a 7-year-old. Reluctantly, some men accepted the challenge, targeting her with a spear. Frightened, Hoyen insisted that wasn't her desire, for friends did not kill. After the euphoria passed, Summon agreed. His expression turned shy, and the girl teased him, leaving him irritated. They sealed the deal. 10 years hence, they would meet again. She looked forward to his spear. Pausing, he found her words strange. Despite their age gap, she played with the situation. She intimidated him, declaring that in 10 years she would be so grown he would have nothing to comment. Summon set 3 goals: survive, seize every opportunity from his memories, and most importantly, not die until that day. He promised Hoyen he would stay alive, having something and someone to live for. They parted ways. In Cenis, Lee Summon achieved 3 things: the martial skeleton, the true celestial cultivation technique, and the tournament for the classless, which only those without class could enter. 10 months after Hoyen's departure, Cenis held another tournament. By then, Lee Summon's martial arts had become formidable, easily winning. The prize was a secret energy elixir to enhance internal energy, which he drank immediately. Yet, compared to Hoyen's gift, it felt insignificant. With that, he felt he had accomplished all in Cenis. Now, it was time to depart. On the way, he met Hans, a street vendor, who congratulated him and asked what he wanted to buy. In truth, it was a farewell. Hans gave him a second-hand dimensional bag with 50% more capacity. Summon, confused, accepted the gift, understanding it could be repaid 100-fold when he became famous. Grateful, he returned to the inn, where Lula, the innkeeper's daughter, noticed he was leaving. She expressed mild sadness and mockingly wished he would die a horrible death. Jack, the innkeeper, apologized, but Summon, mature for his age, was unfazed. Jack gave him an old cloak imbued with temperature, retention, and sword magic, advising him to adjust it as it was too big. Wearing the cloak, he left, but paused when he heard shouting. Lula ran to him, breathless, retracting her earlier wish, now hoping he would live a long life. Touched, Summon admired her kindness. She confessed she had started looking at him differently, though she didn't fully understand why. They remained silent until someone pointed out that she had already realized her feelings. They said goodbye, both knowing they would be apart. In his past life, Summon took 3 years to graduate from Cenis. This life, only 1. He left with precious memories, wondering if he would return to Ira. He reached Mount Mercy as a young practitioner, needing to choose prohibitions to avoid death. Hoyen had asked where they would meet again, admitting she didn't know the world's geography well. The hero decided on Behar, still 9 years until the promised day. He needed time to train. Mount Mercy, the god of trials in Ira, allowed hundreds of times more efficient training. Upon finding it, He began training under 2 prohibitions: weight, making everything unbearably heavy, and taste, rendering all food revolting. Weak, he considered giving up, realizing mercenary life might be easier. Yet, he remembered Hoyan and forced himself to eat. Beside him, the goddess whispered, judging him insolent. Energy circulated through his body. A week passed, weather merciless. Hunting was difficult. A deer appeared, but he couldn't kill it. His journey became harder daily, struggling for food, clothing, and shelter under extreme temperature and prohibitions. Then a woman appeared, carrying a voice prohibition, able to communicate only by gestures. She killed the deer, writing in the area's language to offer help with no repayment expected. She introduced herself as Bakogo, the lightning, fast and mobile, a legendary figure he knew from his past. Shockingly, in 8 years she would be killed by Hoyan. Practitioners received severe prohibitions every 6 months, unable to harm each other. Bakogo had lost sensation in her left arm after a year and a half, like Summon's taste prohibition. She introduced him to other mountain dwellers: Scarlet, a future Grand Mage who couldn't bathe; Dapijun, future Phantom Sword, blind, and back, so, restricted in left eye, arm, and speech. Lee Summon realized these unknowns would become powerful figures. Scarlet asked about his prohibitions, doubting him, while Doc June praised his ambition. A 5th figure, Flam, was feared. 4 months of intense training followed, worsening prohibitions but improving his skills. His Violet Dawn mystic art rose to 3 stars, strikes precise and powerful. He accepted suffering as part of his chosen path. He met Flam, a peer, observing his spear technique. Flam imitated Summon perfectly, frightening him. Flam mocked others, but also respected Summon's techniques. Summon realized that to stand among geniuses, he needed extraordinary effort. Bakogo decided to teach him the Shadowless Soul Flight Manual, a secret movement and mystical art. She became his senior sister, revealing care and sympathy. Summon trained, alternating stances, visualizing destruction he would inflict upon himself against Hoyan. After 10 years, he still could not defeat her, and she deemed teaching him a mistake, withdrawing her powers. Summon suffered, yet he continued. Nightmares haunted him under new prohibitions, heat and dreams. Sleep brought pain, revisiting childhood horrors and anxiety. The young man remained determined, risking body and mind. He added these prohibitions, surprising Bakogo, who saw his audacity. He endured for his grand goal, to stand among the strongest. She handed him the Shadowless Soul Flight Manual, ensuring he would not give up. With her guidance, he trained tirelessly, always recalling Hoyan's affection. After years, he still could not surpass the little celestial demon, yet he remained steadfast. Summon awoke from a nightmare about Hoyan, sweating and heart racing. Scarlet, present during his sleep, observed him closely, revealing knowledge beyond the ordinary. The woman commented on his recent actions, especially the addition of new prohibitions. Her proximity made him uncomfortable, and the stench she carried seemed to affect even his eyes. With sarcastic remarks about his choice of restrictions, the prohibition of dreams and heat, she claimed he would die. The protagonist was already feeling sick from that horrible smell when Doc June appeared. They were both there for a reason, to help him. Confused, the hero didn't seem to understand why the two of them had suddenly appeared. Scarlet repeated that they had come to help Lee Summon. They had been sent by the mute woman and brought magical means with them. Upon noticing that Backsog was planning something, the boy understood everything. Scarlet had prepared magical scrolls with which he could learn spells. By possessing the scrolls, everything could become more convenient in the world of magic. The landscape reflected a glowing lilac from the sky. Dapijun offered more physical and direct help to deal with the suffering caused by the prohibitions. Determined, The young man was willing to do the best he could. At that moment, the two were preparing for battle. Scarlet taught 4 types of magical techniques. The first was mental cleansing. It was used to purify his mind, which was contaminated by nightmares. The second technique was a simple magic that could strengthen him faster. It was extremely useful when maintaining the prohibition of weight. By the end of the day, the sky took on a more orange hue with few clouds. While fighting Doc June, he used the third magic to restore fatigue, a magic to recover from fatigue, but excessive use would drain his life force, possibly failing. However, if he wanted to endure that hellish training, he had no other choice. Even with all the preparation, his performance in combat against an old blind man was still weak, unable to last a mere 100 seconds. Some claimed he would do better next time. Suddenly, the prohibition of heat began to reverberate throughout his entire body. Dosey helped as much as he could, pressing specific points on his body to make him more resistant to the cold. Shortly after, the boy began to feel a little better. The sword, Phantom, pressed blood vessels that boosted metabolism so he could withstand the prohibition. After helping the boy, the old man calmly walked away, saying it was extremely difficult to find a sparring partner on that mountain. Lee Summon showed gratitude and realized that without all that help, he would have died a long time ago. Since his regression, the people around him had become warmer and more helpful. Reflecting on it, he realized that attitude was very strange. To him, it wasn't something natural for human beings. Ever since he returned, everyone was much friendlier to him, not matching his memories of the past. As he walked, Scarlet called out to the old man, who noticed her unpleasant smell from afar. Annoyed, the woman hated being treated that way just because she hadn't bathed in a few days. The two talked about the boy, Lee Summon, and how they were helping him. For an old man who only cared about martial arts, he was taking care of the boy with all his heart. But the help wasn't coming only from him, since Scarlet also personally made magical scrolls. Reflecting on it, neither of them understood why they were helping the protagonist. They only knew that, when they saw him, they couldn't leave him alone. While reflecting on the help from those around him, Sai decided to set those thoughts aside. To him, in this new life, he was just a lucky boy. Half a year later, the landscape was still filled with purple moss. A warrior held his weapon with all his strength. In the middle of the forest, he continued practicing his skills. Alone, and in the middle of nowhere, his expression was pure exhaustion. Even so, he would not give up. Beside him, another character called him a larva. Impressed, he said he didn't believe he would last this long. The warrior remained kneeling in the same place. Without saying anything, he had ignored that person since the day they met. One possibility was that he had taken the prohibition of voice, reaching the half-year mark, and had been added for convenience. Without stopping to talk for a second, the character said he thought he would choose only more complicated prohibitions. Suddenly, the warrior lowered his weapon to the ground. Curiously, the boy watched intently. He was completely different from the person he had been 6 months ago. His evasion, stability, and movements were entirely clean. The movement techniques he had learned from Bako harmonized very well with the protagonist. Thinking it over, he believed that even a larva could achieve something if it crawled enough. Laughing, he said that would be the only thing he could do after taking on 5 prohibitions. Not paying attention to a single word, the protagonist kept training. Intrigued, the character watched again with his large eyes. Finally, he grabbed his combat instrument. Determined, he asked again why he was being ignored since he could understand his body language. Tired, the boy wondered if his companion had nothing better to do. Scared, he knew he couldn't be underestimated, but he would be unable to kill him according to the rule against violence. Despite everything, his companion struck him. Falling to the ground, the warrior didn't even notice the attack. Laughing at the situation, The other realized how pathetic it was since he was crawling on the ground like a larva. He had been able to cause a kind of damage indirectly. Showing his sword, he stated that the boy wasn't capable of doing things like that. That weapon in his hand was a key sword. He provoked him, saying he would never be able to have such abilities. Therefore, he would have to work hard to get where he wanted, while the other character could get there easily. Even with so many obstacles, the protagonist would continue his mission, which left the other very shocked. To him, there was no end to the despair if he kept insisting he wasn't talented. In the other's view, his hard work was probably useless, but he could fight in a different way. No matter how long it took, he would continue fighting slowly like a larva. Therefore, the other could remain arrogant, since one day he would drive his spear into that confident body. While demonstrating his abilities, the boy remained quiet in his place. With more force, he planted the spear into the tree. He paid attention to everything the protagonist tried to explain, even without words. In front of him, he looked quite imposing. In the end, he simply said that if he truly believed that, he would be waiting anxiously for the day to come. The protagonist would not give up or cry halfway through. 1 month later, Lee Summon became a 1-year practitioner on the mountain, and it was time to choose a new prohibition. His choice was the prohibition of hearing. The prohibition of hearing was something torturous. His ears were filled with terrible noises he couldn't get used to. 6 prohibitions. Despite being on the verge of death every day, he continued swinging his spear without fail. With his movements, he could dodge, stay firm, and pierce with ease. His skills were the supreme spear of the 9 heavens, the mystic arts of violet dawn, and shadowless soul flight. Besides that, the fights with Reggresion and the training with Bakugo helped him on this path. Only Scarlet didn't help much. The stronger Lee's summon became, the heavier his body grew, the taste of food became more disgusting, and his dreams more intense. Even greater chills wrapped his body, and there were endless sounds in his ears. However, at times, it was even comforting because it blocked Flam's annoying chatter when he came looking for him. And so, slowly, like a larva, the protagonist continued improving. Upon meeting Murray, he wanted to know why she had summoned him since there were still a few weeks left before adding another prohibition. Yes, she turned to the practitioner and congratulated him for overcoming his test. Confused, he didn't understand what that conversation was about. Suddenly, Flam appeared in front of him. The protagonist was terribly startled. Mercy explained that Flam's existence itself was a test. At that moment, he began to understand everything. Bako, Scarlet, Dakbi, Jun, all of them had become strong and respectable people in the area. Even so, he had never heard of Flam, and he couldn't be a nobody due to his enormous amount of power. Though it was strange he didn't know that Flam didn't truly exist. Flynn explained that he used his extraordinary power as a test to drive the practitioners into despair. Even the most talented looked at the character and fell into complete agony. Now they were worried, losing their minds and running away from Flam. But the protagonist was different. Despite having no talent, he threw himself into an even harsher trial and made Flam his goal. That was a very reckless way to deal with the problem, but the boy hadn't been able to drive him to despair. Therefore, his recklessness was something favorable. Mercy asked the warrior not to reveal Flam's identity to the other practitioners, or he would face the wrath of God. In any case, the young man would continue training on that mountain. The reward for overcoming the test would be delivered the day he left the mountain. If Lee's summon offered his soul to Mercy, she would grant him a power impossible to obtain even with 100 years of training. However, he refused the offer and preferred to keep crawling slowly, training hard. Lee's summon grew a bit thoughtful about what he could do. He truly hated the word effort, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't keep up with all those geniuses. But being a genius did mean he didn't have to make an effort. In the end, he hated those who dismissed the difference between what had happened and what hadn't by attributing everything to effort. But at the same time, he clung to the word effort since his previous life, where he made defeatism his refuge. In this life, he had many faithful encounters, and there were no more excuses for having a different starting point. Having lost his refuge, he had no choice but to move forward, and only now was he beginning to put effort into something. Even so, he stated that he would be able to endure until the end because he liked the word effort very much. Mercy's face lit up as she noticed the young man's determination. She turned around, asking if she should speak to herself for a moment. She said that there was no such thing as coincidence in Arya. There was a reason for everything. Arya summoned travelers from other worlds and dimensions while granting benefits in the form of abilities. Even so, the reason behind it was still unknown. The protagonist realized that Mercy wasn't talking to herself, but to him. That meant she was saying something that couldn't be told to him directly. The girl fell silent for a while. If the protagonist had returned, it meant something was about to happen that required his return. Therefore, he would need to be prepared to be worthy of the reason for his regression. In the end, she concluded her thought with a smile on her face. Even so, her gaze revealed a certain worry. With one hand, she declared that this was her territory and asked for someone to leave unless they wanted to be destroyed. A fragment began to be destroyed, and holes began to appear through cracks. Not understanding, the protagonist remained standing in place. Mercy asked him to return at that very moment. He had to finish his training since there was no time to waste. Before he could say anything, she sent him away. She wasn't sure if Lee's summon would be able to stop everything that was happening. He needed to understand the final destiny. Days later, the sixth chosen prohibition was smell. The smell from the top of Scarlet's head kept stimulating the warrior's nose. Perhaps he shouldn't have chosen the sense of smell. A woman appeared beside him with a mysterious air. The stricter the prohibition, the greater the power gain, and despite the nausea and occasional vomiting, he was fine. Back, so now had the prohibitions of taste and hearing and the pain of having her senses scattered everywhere. Compared to everything the woman had endured before, this was an even more terrible experience for her. The prohibition of senses was worse than she had imagined. The boy paid attention as she said she had something to say. Decidedly, she said she would be leaving that mountain very soon. Without reacting, the two exchanged curious glances. In truth, Baxo didn't need to go through so much suffering as she was well ranked among the geniuses. Having been on the mountain for 2 years, she had likely achieved her goals. The protagonist asked if she was really going to leave, and the woman confirmed it. As for him, he would stay a while longer. With sadness in her eyes, she understood the two would part. Even so, she said she was sure they would meet again. Attentively, Baxo watched the protagonist, who had shared the mountain with her for so long. The little boy from before had become a stronger person. Despite that, if she left, he might die as he would continue taking on prohibitions while pushing himself. The woman thought she should stay a bit longer to finish teaching Shadowless soul flight. Lee summoned, said he would be fine without her. Thanks to Bakogo, he had endured pain for a long time and could now bear his own burden. Thanking Numea, he said that if it weren't for her, he wouldn't be alive in that moment. Realizing her friend's gratitude, her face filled with joy and a gentle smile. Getting closer, she hugged him to show her affection. Surprised by the gesture, the protagonist felt a bit awkward. Letting go of his tough side, his expression softened and gladly accepted the sincere hug. The forest was quiet with the wind moving the trees. Stepping back a little from the boy, Baxo said that he was the toughest person she had ever met. Getting to know the protagonist better, she realized he wasn't as desperate as the others. Disagreeing with that, he said he fell into despair again and again, always returning. Impressed, she said he was an incredible person, since she had given up facing the flames after meeting him. Finally, while looking closely at him, she sincerely asked that someone not die. Returning the request, the protagonist said he would never die. Besides Baksogo, Dokbi-jun and Scarlet also left the mountain. It had been a long time since he had felt the feeling of loneliness. Remembering his cautious side from the early days of his past life, he didn't trust anyone, but now he was sure the humans couldn't live alone. Without them, he wouldn't be alive now. Standing still, he attentively watched a light in the sky. Something had changed in his heart, and an invisible wall had crumbled. At that moment, there was no smell, no weight, and no noise. The feeling of freeband was fleeting, but it felt like it would last forever, and the usual scenery looked different. Just as the protagonist had changed, the world had changed too. The arrival of summer brought the song of cicadas. 7 years later, Bakoba would meet Ouiji Hoyan in the dungeon and be killed by her. To repay Bakoba's kindness, he would prevent that from happening. With a kick, he struck the insect directly. Even so, the cicada managed to escape. Cicada larvae spent 10 years buried in the ground before becoming cicadas. So if he had 7 years to prevent the disaster in 7 years, he might be very strong. Or not. Despite that, he was determined to make sure it didn't happen. Even though the level of his martial arts had increased day by day, it still wasn't enough. He wanted more, and increased the intensity every day, even stopping sleeping. The secret to being able to move, even without seeing, isn't anything special. The protagonist had to sharpen his other senses and remember the surrounding terrain to endure the prohibition of sight. The world had become dark, and the only sense Lee summoned could still rely on was touch. After a week, he was able to move little by little, and the only thing he could hear in the dark world were noises. At some point, the noises began to sound like the singing of cicadas. With the sound of the cicada song, he didn't notice time passing and just kept swinging his spear. His body began to use martial arts automatically, and he started to think more. Being a larva, he wished to become a cicada. After singing while on the ground for a short period of time, he desired to become a cicada. However, that wasn't enough for the protagonist, who wanted more and more. Confused, he didn't know what he wanted to become or the reason for his regression. The season changed, and the temperature of the wind felt different on his skin. Yet, his daily life hadn't changed, and he simply spun his spear around. As the season passed, he grew more accustomed to the dark world. In her home, she was summoned. Lee, summoned, wished to stop the trial. Dazed, he noticed something different in his body. Mercy had returned his senses after so long. Now he could see, and the awful smells and noises had stopped. His body was light, and the chills had vanished. Still, the girl continued to watch him. She was thinking she didn't know how to reward him. Some men had spent 3 years on the mountain, and had done an amazing job enduring all the prohibitions. Many who got too excited ended up dying or giving up. That's why she was very happy to see someone like him appear occasionally, deserving a special gift. With all the calm in the world, Mercy asked what he wished for. Excited, he asked to fight like loose brie. But it wasn't quite like that. Reflecting, he began to reason a bit about his desires. His time was running out, so he needed to grow stronger. With enthusiasm, the protagonist said he wished to become much stronger, even if he wasn't certain about it. He questioned whether Mercy would be able to give him what he needed. Meanwhile, the girl thought carefully and replied that he needed more time. He was shocked to realize that she could give him the time he needed. Placing a mark on his body, she asked him to show it to Daner, who would be waiting for him in Drammer. Daner was the god of time, and would test him. As a friendly tip, she warned him to stay sharp, since Daner's trials were much harder than hers. In the end, everything would depend on the protagonist, who would face a very dangerous fate. With a smile on his face, he replied that he liked everything just the way it was. Having decided everything, he could now proceed, so he could receive the reward for enduring 3 years on the mountain. Happily, he said that Mercy was a very generous goddess. Bringing his reward, she placed a man in a suit and tie in front of him. That was Neville, a negotiator from Arabza, and he was delighted to meet the protagonist. He asked Mercy if that man was her recommendation as a new member. Even so, the man said he wasn't sure if the boy was qualified to join the guild. The goddess asked Neville to take a closer look. He apologized upon realizing that the boy was extremely qualified. The man had merely observed the level of his martial arts. At Summon's age, his level of martial arts would be respected wherever he went. The two began talking about the great guild Arabza, a guild specialized in brokering deals, requests, auctions, and information. They could get whatever their clients wanted. Curious, the warrior asked if they sold elixirs and martial arts manuals, and Neville confirmed. The guild had the great healing elixir of Shaylin and the cherry blossom sword technique from Mount His League. Arabza specialized in that type of negotiation, selling other varieties of rare items. Mercy wasn't a member, but she could buy some goods from time to time. A brokerage guild with the god as a client was quite strange. Extending his hand with confidence, Neville asked if he would join the guild. Having nothing to lose, the warrior accepted the proposal. Handing him a paper, he asked him to sign at the bottom. Now he was officially a member of Arabza. Neville snapped his fingers and gave him a house gift. The protagonist's appearance changed completely, making him more presentable with new clothes and a more modern haircut. Neville took his leave and told the young man to consult him if he had any questions. Mercy asked if he liked the gift, and the boy said he was satisfied. Becoming a member of Arabza was a great achievement, so he should be happy. The protagonist stated that his first destination would be Bahar. However, the goddess warned him about his objectives. She told him not to forget what she said when she was talking to herself. As he walked, the young man remembered the words that said there was a reason for the regression. The G-man was so lost in thought that he didn't notice the approach of some fierce animals. Even with monsters in front of him, he didn't show despair. He was interested in understanding what wasn't a coincidence. While fighting the enemies, he wanted to know who had planned those events. Charging with his weapon, he decided to push those thoughts aside for now. After training for 3 years in the mountains, he had become a peak martial artist. Even if his body was only 18 years old, being at the peak of martial arts at that age was impressive. People might think he was a genius, but he knew he only achieved those feats by receiving blessings and pushing through obstacles. His goal was to become stronger and stronger, using his destined encounters. After defeating his opponents, he walked away determined to reach Bahar. With a smile on his face, he decided he would become a mercenary. The magical armor Devnark was found in the Black Mage's dungeon near Bahar. A rank C mercenary found it by chance. The Devnark armor's ability is fantastic. Rank C mercenaries between the second and third category could become peak martial artists in an instant. If a peak martial artist got that armor, they might even reach the supreme peak as a result. Even though the protagonist could still do more on the mountain, he couldn't miss that opportunity. In a year and a half, the Black Mage's dungeon would be clear, and until then, in Bahar, he needed to establish himself as a mercenary. At the mercenary guild in Bahar, the boy made his request. In front of him, the bartender didn't understand why the boy was telling that story. To become a mercenary, he had to go upstairs and speak to the receptionist. A customer who was eating laughed at the boy who wanted to become a mercenary. Not understanding anything, the fork was only in his hands. Suddenly, the boy was holding the object while the customer looked for his fork. By showing his skills, the bartender understood he was a peak martial artist. A Apologizing for his manners, he asked someone to take a seat. Around them, the curious began to gather. Meanwhile, the two characters sat down. The bartender introduced himself as Mage, Baron, and head of the Bahar branch of the Mercenary Guild. The protagonist wasn't impressed when he explained that he worked as a bartender on the first floor as a hobby. In his past life, the first place he worked as a mercenary was in Bahar. Looking at the documents, he said a peak martial artist usually received the rank as mercenary position. However, Baron knew he was talking to a young, inexperienced boy who had only trained in the mountains. They needed a warrior, so it would be necessary to test the boy's skills. The bartender decided to assign a suitable mission for the test, which would be accompanied by another rank as mercenary. If he were able to fulfill the request, he would receive the title of rank as mercenary. The next day, the mission had already begun. The mercenary realized that his companion was very annoying as he didn't talk much. The man thought he was dealing with a funny guy for stealing that fool's fork at the guild, but he realized he was wrong. Hearing his words, the boy showed no reaction. Even so, his companion still admitted that he would be popular. The name of that man was LWD, an S-rank mercenary of the guild, and even though he had no contact with him in his previous life, he knew his name. He was the designated teammate to complete this request and was likely monitoring the protagonist's actions. Curious, LWD asked if the young man had ever fought an ogre. With a serious expression on his face, he replied that he had not. Ogres were among the most powerful monsters in the area, possessing some magical resistance and skin as tough as steel. The mission was to subdue an ogre seen in the forest near the village. While walking, the mercenary claimed that 2 S ranks would be more than enough to kill an ogre. Even so, there was something strange about that forest. It seemed too small for an ogre. Confused, the protagonist asked where the man was going with those conclusions. He explained that an ogre is at least 3 meters tall, and the largest can reach 5 meters. So, it would need a lot of food. For him, it would be very difficult for an ogre to fill its stomach in a forest that size. At that moment, the young man asked LWD to wait a moment. Nervous, the man wanted to understand what the boy was observing. On the ground, a deer had been completely torn into 1,000 pieces. That kind of destruction could have been caused by an ogre. However, there were no traces that an ogre had eaten the animal. Not smelling anything, LWD stated that the situation was very strange. The two grew nervous upon hearing some unusual noises. Quickly, something approached the two of them. The warriors grabbed their defensive gear. Prepared for the attack, they looked at each other. Furious, the two ran forward with their weapons drawn. A massive creature could be seen destroying everything around it. Frozen, they were left with no reaction, not knowing how to proceed. Desperate, LWD declared that it was totally different from what he had heard. Unable to handle it, he realized the best thing to do was to run. The monster had enormous claws along with a muscular and extremely strong body. It was a chimera ogre, which had undergone modifications. A chimera is a magical creature created with the goal of becoming the final species. The limitations that living beings have can be overcome artificially by combining with other species. So even a chimera based on a rank F goblin would have a difficulty level starting at rank B. Because its base was an ogre, however, the story was different. Not even its S-ranked mercenaries would be able to handle it. Sweet and cold, the protagonist showed a hint of nervousness. Meanwhile, the giant creature continued destroying trees. Debris flew through the surroundings, but someone decided he couldn't run. Suddenly, the ogre charged toward him. The punch was already dangerously close to his face. The mercenary Liu continued his escape, warning the young man of the imminent danger. Seeing that giant hand coming toward him, the protagonist became fully alert. Determined, he jumped and dodged the monster's strike, using the shadowless soul flight technique combined with untraceable steps. Realizing the boy's courage, Ludwash observed everything from behind a tree. Impressed, even he couldn't understand how the boy had moved so fast. He knew that place wasn't Mercy's mountain, and the weight prohibition that usually slowed him down no longer existed. In that case, he would be able to defeat the monster with ease. His second stance was again the shadowless soul flight combined with shadow dance. As he climbed the monster's body, his movements were noticed. Getting closer, he used the supreme spear of the 9 heavens. Upon striking the creature, he unleashed the soul-chasing, killing blow. Lee Summon realized the difficulty he was facing when he noticed the ogre's skin seemed impenetrable. Even with his attack landing, it was very difficult to harm it. The attack with the key sword hadn't even left a scratch. Realizing that the reward for capturing that giant ogre would be the same as for capturing a regular one, Lu knew it wasn't worth it. Even so, he knew it was too late to flee and decided to join the protagonist. However, he remained in place after receiving a message telling him he didn't have to intervene. Noticing it was a sound message, he stayed where he was. The boy was aware of the size of his opponent, but he didn't want the mercenary to get close. With the sound transmission, he remembered that the boy had never fought an ogre before. However, the protagonist was fully aware of what he was facing. Despite not understanding why the sword hadn't caused any injuries, Lee Summon believed he could still defeat the Chimera. With his weapon in hand, he used the supreme spear technique of the 9 heavens combined with the lightning-splitting attack. At that moment, the creature took the full impact of the blow. Upon pulling the sword out, the ogre remained imposing. Lude grew even more desperate upon realizing that nothing had managed to hurt it. Nervous, he knew that nothing he did would help, but Summon didn't give up and still held his weapon. The monster's gaze revealed a certain impatience. Once again, he brought his weapon closer. With a leap, he ended up above the creature. His goal was to strike its eyes, which didn't seem as tough as its skin. The creature felt the impact of the sword when one of its eyes was struck with extreme precision. After distracting it with a red thread, he attacked the ogre's weakest part. Even though he was young, he could fight skillfully. The creature pulled out the object that was causing it pain. Realizing that part of the spear had pierced his enemy, he decided to continue the fight. However, something strange began to happen. Suddenly, the injured eye of the creature returned to normal, completely reconstructed. At that moment, he realized his enemy had the ability to regenerate. That chimera possessed the regenerative abilities of a troll, being a chimera made of trolls. The possibility of victory grew more distant. Thoughtful, Summon wanted to find a way to defeat his opponent, but the chimera was already preparing its next attack. Desperate, Lude shouted at his friend, but the warrior continued to hold his ground. Remembering Bakogo, he knew there were still things he had to do. Thus, he couldn't die in a place like that. The 3 basic things needed to use a spear were skills he had trained every day until he could materialize them. As the creature approached, he remembered Wuji Hoyan and all the intense training, pointing his spear toward the enemy's hands. He realized now was the perfect time to reap the rewards. He would need strength to spin and deflect the opponent's attack. Without wasting time, he did what had to be done. The chimera still appeared imposing, without a single scratch. Running, he charged toward his enemy. With his weapon raised, he recognized the best place to aim. He would need control to spin the spear, sailing around the enemy's attack. With a touch, he got close to those massive claws. Now, he had the necessary control to execute his plan. Meanwhile, the mercenary LWD watched all his movements with intense focus. With a precise strike, the boy confused the creature. Gripping his weapon with all his strength, he decided to use slashing attacks. While his enemy struggled to regain balance, Lee Summon drove his spear into the chimera's leg to stab it. At that moment, he realized it had been hit. Feeling the blow, The tremor let out a scream of pain through its stitched mouth. As expected, the creature's joints were quite weak. When it tried to lunge forward to grab him, the boy was already prepared for the next attack. Confused, the creature decided to try hitting him with precision. Showing all its strength, it attempted to crush him with one of its hands, but he dodged the blow. Now he wondered how long it would take for a broken joint to regenerate. However, there was no time to waste, and he struck again. Due to the impact, his spear broke in two. Even so, he managed to hit his opponent, who dropped to one knee. With the spear embedded in its body, it wouldn't be able to regenerate. Realizing his strike had been accurate, Li's summon revealed a smile. With a weapon still in hand, he managed to hit the creature's arm, preventing it from moving its legs and right arm. Now, the chimera rested one of its hands on the ground as it felt the pain from the impact. Determined, the young man needed just one more strike. He activated the supreme spear of the nine heavens, summon style, along with a lightning-splitting strike. With extreme precision, the chimera was hit. Totally wounded, it could no longer stand, but it still had one arm left. With its massive claws, it tried to strike the protagonist. However, the chimera was too slow and couldn't reach him. Feeling no weight at all, he realized how fast he had become after leaving the mountain. The hero could hear the chirping of the cicadas, the same symphony from Mount Mercy. Getting closer to his enemy, he realized he didn't want to become a cicada. On the mountain, he was a larva. He knew he hadn't trained for so long just to become coconut candy or something like that. Despite all this, the protagonist still didn't know what he wanted to become. At that moment, he managed to strike the chimera's eyes, causing it to fall to the ground. With his weapon in hand, he realized he didn't want to have regrets after experiencing all that in his past life. He would keep moving forward as he prepared for his final destiny. The mercenary LW was completely stunned by the scene he had witnessed. With extreme rage, the boy drove his weapon into his opponent. While watching, he was shocked by the strength of that young man and asked what he was. The boy's expression of exhaustion showed all his effort. Looking at his calloused and injured hands, not even the boy himself could answer the question of what he was. Even so, one thing was very clear to him. He was definitely not a larva. The mercenary Lu didn't understand his words and thought he was a very interesting young man. Meanwhile, a cicada could be seen on the ground. The warrior showed a gentle smile, realizing that the cicada song had stopped. Confused, the bartender didn't understand anything. While observing the giant chimera, the mercenary Lu explained everything that had happened. Defeating a chimera ogre was an SS rank achievement, but there were no precedents to grant that rank right away. Even so, the warrior was satisfied with the S rank. The subjugation reward for the chimera ogre was 27 million, along with an S rank insignia. The chimera ogre's body was delivered to the mercenary guild for investigation, providing a reward of 20 million. Handing over the reward to his companion, Lud said everything should go to the warrior, who received a total of 47 million. Walking through the streets, he felt victorious. To him, that was a huge amount. In his past life, he had risked everything to complete missions, but the most he had ever received was 1 million. Therefore, he didn't know what to do with so much money in his hands until a thought came to his mind. Looking at his weapon, he had a brilliant idea. In an establishment, the conversation continued. The bartender was curious to hear the details of the mission. Luz said the boy was excellent, but the man would have to see for himself. With his staff, he touched his head. Suddenly, he saw everything that had happened inside the forest during the time they were away. His expression showed a mix of surprise and admiration. The mercenary LWD stated that the young man deserved to receive the SS rank. Decided, the man realized he should suggest it, since he couldn't make the decision alone. Noticing that the boy had reached the commercial peak even without a class, he was sure Xion would be interested. Meanwhile, The protagonist stood in a slightly dark place. His voice called for Neville. Suddenly the man appeared in front of him. After saying it was a pleasure to see Summon, he asked why he had been called. The hero had never been truly obsessed with weapons, always looking for something he could stab or strike with. But while dealing with the ogre, he felt the fight would have been easier if he had a better weapon. He wished never to face a situation again where weapons would be his greatest regret. That's why he needed a good weapon. Then Neville would ask what his preferences were and how much he was planning to spend. Offering 47 million, he said he wanted to craft a weapon even if it took a bit longer. However, the amount offered wasn't enough. All the blacksmiths hired by Reggresion were first class and as a result, very expensive. Noel suggested the boy offer his soul as collateral, even if the interest was high. Lee Summon wasn't interested in that proposal and asked if there wasn't another way. Given the conditions, the man realized he could introduce someone who might help him find a weapon. When the warrior accepted the offer, he pointed his finger upward. A beam of dark light could be seen coming from his index finger. Suddenly something appeared in front of the warrior. As the man left, he said he would leave the two of them to talk in that space. Without understanding what had just happened, he began to analyze that agent's ability to tear space. On the other side, a voice realized the young man was just a child. Even without being sure how many times they would meet, Seljurus introduced himself. He asked the boy not to space out and to enter the rift. Looking more closely, he realized it was a dark elf. Entering her space, she revealed her name and said she wanted to order a spear. Handing over his weapon, he said he wanted something similar. Looking more closely, the elf noticed it was a spear with a central plane style and asked if the warrior could show what kind of techniques he used. Confused, he didn't understand the point since for martial artists, showing techniques to others was taboo. She explained she needed to see what kind of techniques he used to create a spear accordingly. The elf affirmed it was necessary. Depending on his style, the details could vary drastically. Losing her patience, she realized she was talking to just a kid. The elf was 400 years old and loved hammering, which is why she had been a blacksmith for over 350 years, even though she didn't have a natural talent for forging. The protagonist seemed confused by the situation. Despite everything, she stated that she was confident her skills were not inferior to those of the dwarves. Hearing those words, the warrior remembered a bit of his own past and thought the two of them were similar characters. After her outburst, she didn't understand why she was saying all that to a child she had just met. So she asked him to look for the dwarves and request a weapon from them. However, Lee Summon was determined to show his martial style. After being convinced so quickly, she found it strange that he hadn't left. The boy said he was convinced upon hearing that her 350 years of experience were real. Face to face, the elf was still at a loss for words. Laughing, she realized the boy was too naive for trusting others so easily. Even so, he didn't feel intimidated. Turning his back, the elf realized he was great with words. Anxious, she suddenly changed her expression while the boy waited patiently for her. Although she was the calculating type, she decided she would create something better than he could afford with the money he had, just because she liked him. With a smile on her face, she realized he might become a regular customer. The weapon would take a few months to be completed, so the protagonist just needed to relax and wait. Sitting on his bed, he meditated for a while. His battle with the Chimera Ogre had been his first real fight as a supreme master at Marshall Peak. Now, he needed to digest the information. According to Weiji Hoyen, his situational awareness was a kind of talent. It had evolved into a sixth sense after his long years of training in the mountains. During the battle against the creature, he felt the sense that allowed him to move his body without even realizing it. This was the sixth sense. Even though it was a powerful ally, he knew he couldn't rely on it alone. The experience in the mountains had improved his sense of touch and sixth sense, but there was still an imbalance. If he didn't improve his other senses, the situation could become complicated. His feeling was that something difficult to undo was about to happen. At the mercenary guild, everything was very quiet. Shuffling some bottles, the man asked if the next order would already be made. Curious, Lee Summon wanted to know what happened to the body of the Chimera ogre. Since it was a chimera, that meant someone had created it. As it was something that needed to be investigated independently, the bartender said he was checking it out with the Mage Guild. No Chimera ogre had been found in his past life. Either no one accepted the request, or the mercenary guild had been defeated. Judging by the circumstances, it must have been the dungeon's master, who would have been discovered 6 months after the chimera was created. Maybe in his past life he had retrieved the chimera, but now that the boy had killed it, the future could change. At the Behar Mage Guild, a voice said it was a pleasure to meet the young man. A mage cast a few spells while being observed. He introduced himself as the Dark Mage, Kim Jong-un. At that moment, he was investigating the chimera. Lee Summon introduced himself as the person who had killed the creature. Realizing the boy was Korean, he asked if there had been a portal crisis in his world, a portal that connects to another dimension and allows monsters to come out. Leaving that subject aside, the mage realized the boy came from a different dimension than his own, but was happy to see another Korean. Returning to the main topic, his expression changed. That was not the only reason for his happiness, but he wouldn't reveal his intentions just yet. Seriously, the boy said he would like to see the chimera's body. To obtain the Damar armor, he would need more information. The mage decided to share a bit of what he had discovered. The creature was not completely dead, so there was no way to uncover all the details. The Dark Mage, who created the chimera, was probably someone of the rank of Great Mage. Additionally, that creature's mouth had been sewn shut, and it was created with a fierce hunger to test the chimera's performance. Until he heard those words, the image of the corpse split in half came to his mind as a justification. Falling silent, the mage noticed the boy wasn't interested in the topic of synthetic monsters. Standing still, he showed no reaction. He decided to return to the previous topic, in which he had said he was happy for another reason. With confidence in his voice, Kim Jong-un stated that the protagonist's causality was a mess. A dark mage was capable of opening someone's soul. Giving advice, he approached the warrior, saying that if he were in his shoes, he would have fallen into despair or gone mad. Curious, he asked if the boy was understanding. With a simple phrase, Lee Summon said that after death, he would suffer forever. Curious, the mage asked why the character's causality was so distorted. However, he seemed very suspicious of the situation and decided not to reveal anything. To earn the boy's trust, the mage decided to make a mana oath to never speak about it. While he made the preparations, the young man seemed very confused by the situation. Since the mage was willing to go that far, maybe it was a good opportunity. In the end, he revealed he was a regressor who had returned to the past after dying. By violating fundamental rules and accumulating too much karma, his causality had become heavily distorted. Determined, the mage revealed one more thing to the protagonist. Anxious, he waited for his words. The man began by saying he was very peculiar, and that not only was his causality distorted, but he was as well. Without finishing the sentence, the words echoed throughout the place. Lee Summon felt some pain in his ears. The mage realized he couldn't say what he wanted. It would be impossible to tell the boy anything. He seemed extremely confused. If he said anything, he would end up dead. Kim Jong-un's face was covered in blood from the words he had spoken. He knew the boy's life no longer belonged to him. Shocked by the information he had received, the boy didn't know how to react. Apologizing for not being able to say anything, he asked him to come back another time. Without understanding what had happened, Summon was extremely confused. At that moment, he remembered a situation he had lived through with Mercy, who tried to annihilate anyone who invaded her territory. Turning his back, he left the place, but a voice called out to him. Turning to see who it was, he saw a woman. Getting closer, she recognized him from the Mountains of Mercy. Despite that, the boy didn't seem to know who the person walking toward him was. Angry for not being recognized, she said her name was Scarlet Lizard. At that moment, he began to think more carefully, since the differences were significant. The two exchanged just a few words. The protagonist asked the woman not to keep nagging him. Furious, she struck him with all her strength. After taking the punch to the face, he recognized Scarlet. Curious, she wanted to know what he was doing at the Mage Guild. The boy said he just had some business to take care of in that place. Upon mentioning the Lamitic Kim Jong-un, she paid closer attention. All dark mages were a bit scary, but he was extremely bizarre, and only someone out of their mind would get involved with him. Finally, the girl asked him to be very careful where he went and said it was nice to see a familiar face after so long. As she walked away, she asked him to visit her lab on the 3rd floor when he got bored. She also asked him to tell her if anyone messed with her friend. Waving goodbye to his friend, he found himself alone again. He remembered Mercy's words when she was alone, and the sentence Kim Jong-un didn't finish. As a premonition, he felt that those people favored him in such a strange way. It felt unnatural. He was sure something was happening, but didn't know exactly what. Many elements had become complicated, making things harder, but he decided to focus on what was happening. A 2-headed troll had an S rank difficulty level with a reward of 60 million ears. Lud appeared in front of him, greeting him. The two would subjugate the trolls together again, and he wanted to show how useful he could be. The young man said he was looking forward to it. What he had realized in his second life was that people could live alone. Lud was a good friend to have around, and his heart, which had hardened, felt comforted by his presence. They had been traveling together for 3 months, receiving numerous rewards for missions. In the last one, they split 50 million between them. To celebrate, they decided to drink a bit at the bar. However, the bartender informed them that someone wanted to see Summon. It was the captain of the mercenary forces, Zine. Vin and Lud exchanged glances upon hearing that information. There was no way someone wouldn't know the famous man. He was the captain of Flare, a force with over 100 mercenaries, and one of the 3 SS rank mercenaries in Bahangr. He was a master at the commercial peak, who perfected the 100 mystic steps of the Sholem Fist admired by some men in his previous life. Even with so many other heroes, he admired him for one reason. Upon meeting the man, he introduced himself as the captain of Flare, Zine, and that reason was because that man was classless. Now that the boy was a master at the Martial Peak, he knew it. That man would soon become a supreme master of the Martial Peak, stating that they were both classless. Just like the warrior, he said he knew how cruel the world was to people like them. And even at 18 years old, the boy sitting in front of him had become a master of the Martial Peak. Getting straight to the point, he asked him to join Flare. The human received the position of vice captain, answering only to Zan. Noah. It was a sudden offer. He noticed the young man's confusion. Handing him something, he asked him to make his decision. After analyzing it carefully, the boy's eyes widened as he realized what it was. Inside the box was a lesser revitalization pill, an elixir created by the Sholem Temple that boosts internal energy. If he agreed to the conditions, the captain would give that pill to him. Handing him a sheet, he asked him to sign the contract. with no magical effects. It seemed very simple. Just obey Zan's orders. If the contract was broken, he would be held accountable in various ways. Furthermore, if the protagonist told him which martial arts he had learned, he would receive a greater revitalization pill. Confused, the protagonist asked if anyone would be willing to accept those terms. With a fearful expression, the man said that anyone who wanted to become a mercenary in Bahar had to accept the conditions. Curious, Lud asked what response his friend gave. The protagonist refused that offer of slavery made to him. His friend realized the moment was bad and advised him to leave for behind. Depending on the situation, he could be at risk of death since Zion did suspicious things. But even if the boy followed him, the man would make things difficult for him. In the past, Lube refused an offer when he was rank A and everyone stopped giving him commissions because they belonged to Flare. Thus, he became rank S in another city and then returned. But even so, Zion was already rank SS. While the protagonist thought Lu drank more and more, he had known that Zion was that kind of person. Even after all the admiration he felt, Lud asked that his friend wanted to go to Mathor with him. A man in the bar informed them that the Dark Mage's dungeon had been discovered. It was probably the dungeon of the Dark Mage who created the Chamorro Ogre. Now they were looking for a team to subjugate the dungeon with Flare in command. A voice said it had taken longer than expected. Despite the time, the protagonist said he would need a weapon urgently. Holding the object, she handed it over. The main material used was mithril, and the exterior was composed of black iron. Both excellent conductors of mana and K. Observing the object, the boy felt overwhelmed and hadn't expected something so good. Neville said that Lady Sel just liked the hero. The agent explained that the materials used to create the weapon were extremely expensive. Although Via had provided extra funds for her to make a better weapon, the elf had practically not charged for labor. But Neville understood the reason she had done that. The protagonist had a strange magnetism making people feel a desire to help him. Noticing the boy's expression, he apologized for saying it as if it were something strange. In the end, he said he would be leaving and asked him to get in touch if he needed anything else. Now, the young man found himself alone and quite reflective. He wasn't surprised because he thought what was said was strange, but because the words confirmed his suspicions. The first time he felt something unusual was at Mount Mercy, but at the time he thought it was just luck. However, he began to wonder if there was something within him, and if that was something that made people like him more, then everyone he had met and everything he had experienced could be considered false. While his thoughts soared, Lud approached his friend. He noticed the strange expression on Summon's face. If his suspicions were true, then even his friendship would be false. Hugging his companion, he asked if he was worried about the dungeon raid. At that moment, he remembered. In the end, his concerns were confirmed when the future changed because he had killed the Chimera Ogre. Thus, the guild began searching for the Dark Mage, and the dungeon was discovered 3 months earlier than in his past life. Furthermore, something else had completely changed. Zen is happy to see the rising star who was joining them on the raid. Upon noticing the boy's presence, he stated that it would be a very easy raid. The mercenary corps of Flare had not participated in the expedition because they were on another mission during his past life. Now, he could participate since it was moved forward by 3 months. ZM noticed that LWD was accompanying him. Smiling, he asked the two of them to be very careful. That dungeon was a very dangerous place, and there was no way to know when or how they might die in the end. After receiving the orders, everyone walked in a line. Lube noticed the threat made by the captain when he said he could kill them amidst the chaos of the expedition. For a moment, the hero considered joining the expedition because of the situation, and in the end he joined due to the terrifying skills involved. It had been 3 months since he returned from the mountain, but he hadn't made any progress since then. To break the status quo, he would need the magical armor Devnark, which could turn a third-rate warrior into a master. Returning to the previous conversation, Lud stated that Zion wouldn't be able to act rashly with so many people around. The Ray had a total of 27 people, including 1 Shrank, 4 Shranks, and 12 Aranks who would join the Flare mercenary corps. Even the leader of the guild, Baron, wanted to join. With his spiritual sword technique, Lud said he would cut off the head of anyone who tried to pull any tricks. Since there was no reason for Lu to join the raid, he probably came because he was worried about a friend. Lee Summon was extremely grateful for that, as it meant he was in trouble with Zion too. At that moment, he remembered something extremely crucial. He decided to stop thinking and start acting. The leader announced that the Behinder Mercenary Guild would enter the Black Sea dungeon. Without knowing what they would find, they only had the certainty that they were the best in Bahar. They should stand firm to be able to handle anything that crossed their path. ready to do their job. With an order, he told everyone to enter the dungeon. The beginning of it all happened quietly with people walking side by side. At the vanguard was the A-rank mercenary Jungle, the master of external arts that made his body as hard as stone. However, despite having lasted a long time, his body was sliced in half like tofu, causing the companions just behind him to stop moving. Unable to do anything, Jungcho was caught off guard by the attack. In the end, his body was split into two pieces, and his friend only held the upper half. The leader became extremely furious with what had happened. Looking around, he realized that several monsters were approaching and understood it would be a very long night. Upon realizing they were Chimas, the men fell into despair. Zoe noticed that everyone was going to have a rough start. The monsters were larger and had extreme alterations in their bodies, which made them stronger. One of the creatures was cut in half by an attack from the captain. The protagonist noticed that he had used the mystic steps and fist technique. From behind, he observed all of his movements. Realizing Xion's strength, he was certain he wasn't strong enough to fight him. Lost in thought, he didn't notice when a Chimer came toward him. That dungeon had been empty in his previous life, so there had been nothing there. Therefore, the master of the dungeon might be in that place. Tired and bleeding, the hero realized something was wrong. The fight was relentless, and many bodies were scattered across the ground. Xion realized they had suffered many casualties and might not be able to continue the raid that way. Provoking the leader, he claimed his squad was much stronger. Lude noticed that Xion had only protected his own men amidst all that chaos. An hour after entering the dungeon, the raid team had lost 2 A-rank mercenaries. Among the survivors, there remained only a solo A-rank hunter who didn't belong to Flare. Tang Masuk Lud introduced himself to the frightened girl, saying she no longer needed to worry. His friend returned to Sman's side after noticing the hunter had become even more scared upon seeing him. Meanwhile, a voice was calling for the guild leader. The hunter reported that the raid team was badly wounded. Hearing the information, the leader prepared to respond. Apologizing, he said it would not be possible to stop at that moment. There should be no major issues in continuing forward since the main forces, the S-rank and S-rank hunters, were still alive. Noticing the girl's fear, he told her to turn back if she didn't feel comfortable staying. Even so, there would be no one to protect her on the way back. Noticing the bodies on the ground, she became much more nervous. Calculating the possibilities, she decided to continue with them. Slowly, everyone began walking, observing their surroundings. Everything seemed extremely quiet, silent, and they began to think that the appearance of the monsters was a distraction so the dungeon master could escape. Using so many cameras to buy time would make sense, but even so, they shouldn't let their guard down due to unconfirmed information. One of the men noticed something ahead. It was a large closed door. It didn't seem to be any kind of trap, just a door. Even so, the protagonist was suspicious. Behind that piece of wood, there was a room filled with books. Carrying a candle, the man reported that there was nothing special in the place. It was just a library. The leader decided they should split up to look for more clues since it was a large area. However, Sman had a strange feeling upon entering that place. He knew it was the location where the man had found the magical armor that had changed his life for the better. While some listened from the corner, the man said that after walking through the cave for hours, he saw a door. When he entered, he saw an enormous library, the same library that he now stood in. Now, he would need to figure out which book he had touched while in that place. After searching his shelves a bit more, a door opened in front of him. Revealing his staircase, he realized the magical armored Devanark was hidden down below. Zia noticed that the boy had found the secret passage, saying that he had done a good job. The boy grew desperate. Turning around, the protagonist said he had found the passage by coincidence. With a strange expression on his face, the captain said he liked people like him. At that moment, Lee Summon became increasingly shocked by his reaction. Suddenly, the man punched him in the stomach. The protagonist rolled down the stairs. Zhu knew that if he couldn't have the boy on his side, he had to get rid of him as he would be a threat due to his talent. Baron was in another room with the captain's subordinates, so no one would interfere. However, Lud appeared at the top of the staircase, showing he was still there. He had used the spiritual sword technique to get rid of the subordinate guarding the entrance. The man was sure Xion had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to reveal his true self. Besides, Lud knew he would be the next to die after Summon. Suddenly, his friend was thrown down the stairs. Xion couldn't believe those two thought they could defeat him. The hero knew his chances were slim, especially if the other members of Flare helped. Even so, his gaze showed he wouldn't give up so easily. With urgency, he grabbed his companion and started running. Without understanding anything, he simply said they had to reach the lower level as quickly as possible. The magical armored Devanark, which boosts the user's abilities, would give them a chance at victory. Quickly, the two reached their destination. The protagonist's eyes scanned everything around him. Suddenly, he saw the armor in front of him. While Lude guarded the entrance to the lower level, he walked toward the rare item. Quickly, his friend noticed Xion approaching rapidly, who delivered a punch to his chest. His hand passed completely through Lu's body. Totally shocked, the protagonist watched the scene. In the end, Xion pulled his hand out and let the body fall to the ground. Before dying, Lu managed to strike his shoulder. Stunned, the hero was still trying to understand what had happened. He remembered his best moments with his friend, who now lay lifeless at his side. Gathering all his rage, he showed his anger. But Xion was not concerned with his reaction. Since they were both classless, they knew that strength was everything. Therefore, they couldn't trust anyone, as even scattered trash could betray you. The boy tried to strike his opponent with a kick. Tired of talking, Xion simply wished for someone's death. After being hit, the boy fell near a pile of rocks. His weapon was good, blocking many of the opponent's blows. While punching him in the face, he demanded that the boy hand over his fighting instrument. Touching the weapon, he realized it was much lighter than it looked. Observing its components, he noted it was made of mithril. Suddenly, he sensed something strange around him. Pieces of the armor began sticking to the protagonist's body. Upon receiving the Demark armor, he began to recover all his strength. Zam realized that it was magical armor. Now the protagonist seemed stronger than ever. Afraid, Xion notices a dark energy surrounding his body, unable to tell if it was dangerous within his aura. Summon waits for the perfect moment to begin his attack. At that moment, the magical armor was already fully on his body. Standing still, the two stare at each other for a while until an explosion occurs. Not knowing what that dark energy was, the man doesn't understand why it suddenly disappeared. With a punch, he hits his enemy, asking to fight again. Confused, the protagonist realizes there was no change in his physical or internal energy. Regardless, Xion declares that the boy had done a good job so far in dodging his attacks. Even so, he would be the next to die. Upon seeing his fallen companion, he realizes the situation is complicated. A hand approaches his body, deciding to finish him off. The mystical creature defends him from the attack. For obtaining the Damar armor, he would have to pay a huge price. Even so, the contract with Damar had not been established. When trying to strike the creature, Zen seemed very weak and powerless. The sixth sense the boy had been sharpening until now scream at him not to fight that thing. Upon hearing a thunderous noise coming from underground, the men start to run. The leader asks if that was the Dark Mage. However, the mask once says nothing to him, only showing his fingers. At that moment, the leader realizes it was a lich. Sensing the imminent danger, a man urges everyone to flee quickly. However, the monster is much faster than everyone in the room. With a simple spell, it manages to kill Baron. As they try to leave, they realize the exit is blocked. The creature warns them they were only in that place because it allowed it. It was feeling great that day for having acquired a better offering than the Chimera Ogre. As it approaches the characters, it reflects on its destiny. It declares that the day of satisfaction for those who believed in it was not far off. This was the Lich Preskin. The battle ended quickly and the Dark Mage killed everyone, including the dozens of Rank S mercenaries. Baron, who was in front of a Great Mage, was cut in half in a single instant, and even Xion was easily defeated. By then, the protagonist wonders how it came to this point. He thought things would be different for him compared to his past life, that he would no longer be a larvae or a cicada because he had become something else. With sad eyes, he watches the body of his friend in front of him. The protagonist realizes he was mistaken and was still just a larva. The creature was extremely terrifying. Meanwhile, the protagonist is chained to a wall. The Lich welcomes him to its workshop and asks the boy not to waste his energy as he won't break the chains easily. Letting out a frightening laugh, it watches him try. The monster makes a strange confession. It says it wishes to become a woman. To it, women are so incredible that they are capable of achieving something extraordinary that many alchemists can accomplish in a lifetime. Because of that, it tried to become a woman in every way, but got lost in magic and offered its soul and flesh to obtain eternity. Eventually, it ended up finding its answer. Even if it couldn't give birth, there was still a way to create life. Hearing those words, the hero seemed stunned. To the Lich, that was a perfect day. The companion it once met, whose karma was a mess, had become a monster. If it used someone like the warrior, a person with distorted karma, as an offering, it would probably be closer to achieving its dream. Holding the boy's face, it reveals its intentions. Desperate, the protagonist doesn't know how he could escape that situation. His eyes watch everything happening around him. The Lich decides to offer its offering. At that moment, the boy's breathing becomes erratic. Displaying all its powers, the Lich senses something strange. Not understanding what was happening, it becomes confused. All of that was something extremely impossible to it. Turning its back on the boy, it becomes very reflective. Meanwhile, the boy's breathing grows more and more labored. It realizes its offering had been rejected. Grabbing the boy's neck, it comes closer. Curious, it questions who the boy was and why the demon king of fear had rejected him. That soul with distorted karma held great value as an offering. Desperate, the lich decides to search through his memories to discover who he was. Amidst the confusion in its mind, the creature demands that he show everything. When the boy woke up, the lich was already gone. Lee Summon was relieved to be alive, and in the next moment he realized he was completely alone in the darkness. But the noises and sounds continued in his head. He remembered everything that had happened before and couldn't relax. He recalled the expression on his friend Lud's face as he fell dead. The sound of the cicada, which had disappeared after he defeated the chimera, had returned. However, he was soon able to move, not because of his experience in this life, but due to his willpower as a third-class mercenary in his previous life. Moreover, he had made a promise to his friends and could not die. While his eyes bled, he repeated the promise he had made to himself, trying to gain strength. The hero was used to this kind of situation. Regret, shame, and self-pity were things he could only feel after surviving. While standing still, he receives a telepathic communication. Light, the master of the Tower of the Golden Mage, was trying to ask for help. The man is far below where the protagonist was at that moment. Revisiting memories from his past life, he remembers the disappearance of that master. The man states he needed the warrior's help. He was seriously injured, unable to move, and asks the boy to get him out of that place. Curious about the lich, the boy informs him it had disappeared. However, the boy was still a little suspicious of the man's words, unsure if that was a safe place. Swearing by his mana, he promises the boy would be greatly rewarded if he helped. Meanwhile, the boy continues descending. After some time, he at last arrives at the location where his presence was requested. Claiming to be lucky for managing to contact the hero, Lloyd awaited him anxiously. Those ruins indicated that a great battle had taken place. At that moment, the boy notices something strange. Looking down, he sees Zion dead with a hole in his chest. He asks Lloyd what had happened, saying he would explain the trivial details. Later, he asks for the protagonist's help. Without moving from his spot, he asks how he could be useful. The mage informs him that he must get him out of the dungeon. Furthermore, with his index finger, he points to something on his left. Pleading, he orders Summon to destroy that thing. Apparently, it was a heart made by Preskin. Because it was a very dangerous item, it had to be destroyed. With his spear, he tries to strike that heart. However, there is a protective barrier surrounding it. As he tries to get closer, that heart transforms into something dangerous. Suddenly, claws try to reach the protagonist, but his sharp spear makes the heart vanish from his sight. Not understanding what happened, the boy is left speechless until he realizes that the heart ended up inside his own body. He had obtained the black heart within him. Hours before Lee Sunman obtained the heart, the Lich Preskin stumbled as he was leaving that place. He used a type of magic that distracted people's minds to extract their memories, but the magic somehow ricocheted and even the Demon King of Fear rejected the boy as an offering. That way the Lich realized he had used too much mana. Observing the two hearts in front of him, he thinks of a new plan. Decided he would use one of the fallen men on the ground to recharge his mana. However, Zion was still alive. While holding the man by the neck, the Lich unleashes all his powers to recharge his mana. After draining the energy of two of them, the creature feels better. Looking at the third lying on the ground and realizes he was pretending to be asleep. Desperate, Zion was sweating cold, trembling because of his cruel fate. He was able to break free from the chain magic, revealing himself to be an extremely strong person. Decided the Lich would dare use him in a much more valuable way due to the level of his soul. Lloyd asks what Preskin was going to do this time. The mage realizes he was still conducting disgusting and disrespectful research. After 10 years, the mage had found the Lich. Because of his persistence, one mage kept hunting him. Realizing he was weak, he decides to destroy his body and then find his life force core. Zion recognizes Lloyd as the master of the Tower of the Golden Mage, the Archmage. Determined, Zion reveals that he would help in the mission to defeat the Lich. But the best thing for him would be to just watch as he wasn't strong enough. Desperate, the Lich realizes that it was a very bad day for him due to the rejected offering and Lloyd's appearance. At that moment, he remembers his two hearts. Although to complete, he had no other choice. At that very moment, he begins to cast a spell. Desperate about what had been created, the mage doesn't understand that man of flow. However, that was the result of his research. With a smile on his face, he reveals it to be the Supreme Existence. A small explosion occurs underground. Suddenly, a foot can be seen. Desperate, Lloyd doesn't understand what's happening. Finally, the Lich was able to create a woman. Although the physical body and the heart were not ready, he still had another heart. He would just have to use the incomplete product to overcome the crisis and work to perfect the other heart later. Realizing the futile resistance, the master of the Tower of the Golden Mage decides to completely get rid of that thing. Casting a powerful spell, he threatens everyone around him. The Lich asks the girl to take care of that bastard while he casts yet another of his spells. The girl watches for the best opportunity. His magic is not able to scratch her, not even slightly. Nervous, they realize his spell was completely dissipated and with extreme ease. Happy, the Lich sees that the girl did an excellent job. While calling him daddy, she says she is very hungry. At that moment, her attention turns to Xeon. With a single strike, she gets his heart precisely. That was how the captain of the strongest mercenary guild in Bahur, about to become the master, the Marshal Peak, died, heart ripped out without being able to offer any kind of resistance. What happened next was pure insanity. Realizing the girl's powers, the master panics. Meanwhile, the Lich laughs at the situation he created. That monster would be capable of anything. The battle continued and the master used all his magic and all of his mana on the girl. And after being gravely wounded, the two fled. That was the full account of what had happened in the cave. Lloyd expresses only gratitude for the boy who saved his life. Furthermore, he was grateful for destroying that heart. Having fainted after calling for help, the master didn't see anything that happened. Despite everything, the boy was confused about that thing inside his body. Lloyd thanked him and promised to reward his heroic act. It was like a blank check given by a great mage. But since he needed nothing, he simply kept that reward. Besides, Lloyd couldn't know about the heart. Prezin was the master of the Black Magic Tower, but another execution order had been placed on him because he acted against the rules. The person who accepted the mission was the master of the Golden Magic Tower, Lloyd. At the end of a 10-year pursuit, there happened to be a chance during a raid. However, in his previous life, he died in the cave. Since the raid was originally going to occur a few months later, that's how he disappeared. Someone who was supposed to be dead was now alive due to the boy's regression. And furthermore, someone who should be alive is now dead. The boy feels extremely guilty for the death of his Lude. He was like a frog in a well where the hero of his world was Xeon. To them, there were many monsters that could be easily killed, and what he thought was the sky was only the exit of a well. There was always someone whose sky was much vaster than his own. Now, he wonders what level Hoyan had reached. When he was on Mercy Mountain, the protagonist became aware that he was just a worm. Therefore, he would not despair over what he couldn't have, crawling in little by little like a worm. As he walks, a voice calls out to him, apparently happy to see him. Kim Jong-un states that most of the raid team died, but the boy returns safely. Noticing his armor, he realizes it was an unparalleled artifact. Curious, he asks to take a closer look. The protagonist allows him to observe as he needed to ask him some things. That armor is a type of force contract tool that creates a link between the Transcendent, the Demon King, or the Demon God. The armor bypasses the official ways of making an agreement and forces the wearer into a slave contract. Drawing on the board, a mage tries to explain in more detail by showing that a martial artist would have their potential increased. However, after their death, that person's soul would belong to the Demon King since nothing had happened to a character after using the armor. In that situation, it was quite interesting. The mage explains that there were two possibilities. One was that he no longer had the potential to be. The second explanation was that he made a contract with the master even stronger than the master of the demonic armor. The mage's opinion pointed to the second option as the most likely. In his mind, the question that came was why the Demon King of Fear had rejected him. If the contract wasn't active, it would be fine to use the armor that way. With a snap, he removes the armor from the boy's body. By transforming the object into a bracelet, he declares that could be used that way, returning to its previous form with mana. Continuing the conversation, the protagonist states that he was offered as a sacrifice to the Demon King by the Lich. It was extremely remarkable that the boy was able to maintain his sanity even after facing him. With a smile on his face, he asks if he understood where he was going with that. The boy questions whether his soul was at a higher level than the Demon King of Fear, but he couldn't answer his question. At that moment, everything starts to become extremely clear. Moreover, he mentions that his body absorbed something strange and the mage already knows it is a dark heart. Even so, he states that he didn't feel any different energy inside him. Prescott researched the ultimate form of life and his heart was the product of that desire. Therefore, that bracelet could result in something that is on a different level compared to the demonic armor. Apologizing for not being able to give a good answer, the mage says that if it's a god, maybe they could give a more suitable response. At that moment, he remembers Mercy's words who told him to go to Drymore in search of Daner, the King of Time. Perhaps Daner, the god of time, would be able to answer his questions. Thanking Kim Jong-un for his help, he says goodbye. As a warning, the mage says that he likes him very much and could be sought out any time. Feeling a certain pressure, the protagonist believes he understood. As he leaves the room, he closes the door. He discovered many things during that conversation, but now had many other questions. His next step would be to go to Demore. A voice calls for release some men as it runs quickly through the corridors. Kicking him in the neck, Scarlet reminds him of the warning not to get involved with that mage. Rubbing his new injury, the boy doesn't understand why he always got beaten whenever he met her. With an angry expression, Scarlet warns that nothing good would come to him if he got involved with that guy. But he replies that he has a few questions for the mage, telling him to direct the questions to her instead. She starts by asking what kind of question he has. He begins by asking how old the girl is. Extremely irritated, she immediately changes her expression. That wasn't the kind of question to ask a lady. As they walk, she says he survived the raid alone. Even after everything he had faced, she stated that he was fine, but his expression revealed a deep sadness. He reveals that his next step would be to go to Drammer since he had some pending matters. Upon hearing that, the girl offers to accompany him on his journey. She says that she also had business in Drimore, and since they were both going to the same place, it would be great to have someone to talk to. Noticing his nervous expression, she asks if he doesn't want her company. In truth, the protagonist just didn't know how to respond because he was caught off guard. He didn't dislike the idea since she was a genius with magic that belonged only to her and would soon become the master of the Crimson Magic Tower. To him, it would be a great idea to become friends with someone like that. However, he didn't understand why people were so friendly around him, thinking it might be something inside him. All the connections he had made until that moment were nothing but lies. He thinks that Lud's death might have been in vain. Even so, he had no concrete proof. It was only a suspicion. But Scarlet might be going on this trip for the same reason. Moreover, if something goes wrong and she meets the same fate as his friend, the protagonist would never forgive himself, and that's why he didn't want to travel with her. When he saved Lloyd and gained the Black Heart, he searched Xion's corpse. Someone like him who distrusted everyone would definitely keep precious items with him. He had a lesser revitalization pill, a greater revitalization pill, and the secret Shaolin Manual of Ultimate Martial Arts. All those items were priceless. Regardless of what the protagonist was worried about, he needed to become stronger first. Decided, he swallows one of the pills. Anxious, he waits for the changes in his body. On top of his bed, he begins to meditate calmly. However, when he stands up, he feels no change at all. Normally, when someone takes an elixir at the level of a lesser revitalization pill, internal energy emerges within the body. Since no major change occurred, he realizes it might be a fake item. At that moment, something begins to shine in his stomach. To sum it up, his internal energy increased exponentially and the pill was not fake. When taking an elixir, the internal energy that is acquired explodes and the person must circulate the energy in order for it to become theirs. Without doing anything, the protagonist managed to absorb all the internal energy from the lesser revitalization pill. It wasn't difficult at all and he made all the internal energy his own. Therefore, what happened might be related to the heart inside his body. At that moment, he turns to a small box. He takes the greater revitalization pill in his hands. He was able to perfectly absorb both the internal energies of the lesser and greater revitalization pills. He was nearly on par with the martial arts master at the supreme peak in terms of internal energy. The only plausible explanation for the absorption of all that energy would be the effect of the dark heart. Without being certain of anything, he realizes he was able to solve the internal energy deficiency he had always struggled with. However, he would need to do something about it. His eyes become more focused as he has an incredible idea. In front of him, Scarlet questions why he's going to Britain instead of Drimore. The protagonist says the trip with her would no longer be possible and apologizes. After obtaining a secret martial arts manual from the Shaolin Temple, he decides to return the item to Braden, realizing he was just a kid. Scarlet says there are tons of people selling martial arts in the market. That's why the protagonist states he intends to return it to the Shaolin Temple and receive a reward for it. Since the girl only had business in Drammer, she couldn't accompany him on his trip. However, her expression completely changes as she claims she also had business in that place. They weren't really business. She just wanted to see the world. She didn't think she fit into cities and preferred training in places like mountains. She confesses that she would settle in a nice place after traveling for a while. Annoyed, she says she'll take a bath to join him on the trip. Some houses are seen while the two talk. Now the two could travel together again. Moving Summon's head back and forth, she says the boy was agreeing and giving his word. After receiving blows from the woman, he decides that she would be his travel companion. The departure was scheduled for a week from then, and the boy tried to see it as something positive, since he would have someone to talk to along the way, and it would be less dangerous. A mysterious girl approaches asking who was in front of her. In the dark night, the two characters stand still, watching attentively. Confused, they don't really understand the situation. The girl starts to transform, saying that after meeting him, she felt very strange. Her hands take the shape of something giant and grotesque. Curious, she asks who that boy was. Some time ago, while walking through the forest, the Lich thought that Lloyd was a truly strong person. He knew the word genius had been invented to describe someone like him. If he hadn't awakened the girl in time, he wouldn't have survived. That child was his greatest creation. Meanwhile, the girl seemed to completely ignore him. He calls to her as he realizes what she's doing. He wasn't able to control the girl properly since she had been awakened in a hurry, and he realized she didn't follow his orders. The only thing he was sure of was the obedience seal, which guaranteed that the girl wouldn't attack. Wiping his face, he said she would need to go to the place where she was awakened to retrieve the Lich's heart. That mission would be crucial for her survival. The girl was supposed to get the heart and return to the same place. Realizing that she understood his orders, he commands her to go in the pointed direction. However, the girl runs in a completely opposite direction. Confused, the Lich doesn't understand where she was going and believes not even she knew. Even though her father had told her to go somewhere else, she felt something strange in that direction. Her heart was beating very fast and she had no idea what that sensation was until she saw two people in front of her. Summon turns around, noticing a frightening presence approaching. Placing one foot in front of the other, the girl appears curious to know who that outsider was. Nervous, the boy feels a strange sensation upon seeing that face. Her hands start to turn into something extremely disturbing. Lee Summon notices the desperation in her eyes. Suddenly, the girl begins to expand her own body. Scarlet doesn't understand why her companion was standing in the same spot, not reacting at all. Casting a spell, she fires something in the direction of that girl. The spell hits her tentacles, which were shattered from her hand. However, the protagonist felt pain in his heart and knew he had to recover. Scarlet's expression revealed confusion about that girl. She had never seen anything of that scale before. That might be Presenstra, the one Lloyd had spoken of, and perhaps she wanted to retrieve the heart. That girl killed Xeon in an instant, and the great mage Lloyd barely survived after facing the two of them. Determined, he tries to use his bracelet. For his survival and Scarlet's, he would have to manage to use the armor. Suddenly, energy is released and the suit forms on his body. Meanwhile, the girl is already preparing her next attack. With her dark tentacles, she tries to get closer to the protagonist. Wielding his weapon, he notices the strike and turns in the right direction. With the leap, he needs to get closer to that child. In every possible way, he tries to inflict injuries on his enemy. Her attacks were not conventional and her fists were much stronger than the ogre Chamir's. If he hadn't increased his internal energy with the elixir, the situation would be in serious trouble. Meanwhile, Scarlet asks Summon to get out of her way so she can cast a spell. Her body is thrown back with force as she casts a fire spell. The girl had already noticed her movement and tries to escape, but she is hit and feels extreme pain. Scarlet says she felt a great magical resistance coming from the child. Even if she could neutralize most magic, hers was still somewhat special. Standard resistance didn't work because she placed an enchantment to create her secret magic. However, she didn't expect a strike coming her direction. Quickly, the protagonist places himself in front of her. Burning everything around, he protects her. Thinking for a moment, he reflects on the situation. Remembering Jean, he realizes it might be the mystic fists of 100 steps. Lloyd had set the girl Asian's heart. Therefore, she could learn the abilities of everything she consumed. Now he was certain that she was a monster. Feeling the pressure, the protagonist appears dazed. Meanwhile, the girl doesn't stop for even a second. Again, she tries to strike him. He couldn't use control or strength to counter those attacks. As they fought, the girl says she had asked him something. Curious, she wanted to know who he was. While defending himself, the protagonist thought only about escaping that place. Ready to cast a new spell, Scarlet tried to draw the girl's attention. After hitting her in the face, she says she should spend her luck more wisely. Provoking the girl, she says she made her really angry. Upon hearing those words, the child changes her expression completely. Her gaze notices something unusual. Suddenly, hands grab her feet, preventing her from moving. It was the spell cast by the red-haired girl. Meanwhile, the protagonist approaches without the girl noticing. With a strike, he tries to hit her face. At that very moment, the girl frees herself from those hands by cutting off her own legs. Confused, the boy is shocked by what his eyes are seeing. After mutilating her body, the girl begins to fall. However, she quickly transforms her body through new magic. Without them realizing her legs were already back in place, the two were infuriated by this, realizing the fight would be long. In a short time, she was able to regenerate both her legs. Even the burned parts had been regenerated. For Scarlet, that situation was extremely irritating. The exceptional regeneration ability had a mana limit. After fighting her, they had the advantage of fighting together to deal heavy damage. In that way, her mana would hit the limit and they could emerge victorious. At that moment, the girl reveals her powers. Seeing the amount of mana, Scarlet asks someone to forget that plan. That was a major problem. Meanwhile, the battle continues. The protagonist tries to defend himself even though he is very tired. Falling to the ground, Scarlet asks if he is okay. Angrily, she says he can't die and leave her alone. At that moment, the boy realized that a change had to be made. He had changed the world around him, having transformed into something else in the mountains. However, that wasn't enough because he dreamed of things he could never reach. A larva should only crawl, and if one step is not enough, tens of thousands must be taken. Therefore, he thought he was incapable of doing it because he was satisfied with just one step. In the mountains, he didn't leave because he wanted to get the maniac's armor, and when he hit a wall, it seemed too high. In the end, he wanted to take an easier path, and made the excuse that he would get the demonic armor to leave the mountain. The price he had to pay for that decision was enormous. He lost his loyal companion. Therefore, the protagonist considered himself useless and pathetic, and because of that, he had to fight. Realizing he had chosen to run away, he reflects that he shouldn't have done that. The heavy weight of the spear he hadn't felt in so long, the static noises and the cicadas. He only wanted to be side by side with her. He wanted to change his destiny by all means. In the end, he just didn't want to die. He had a dream too big for a larvae, but even so, he didn't want his life to end. All of that was very hard to do. In that case, if he managed to gain possession of something he didn't deserve, he shouldn't have taken just one step. While reflecting on his life, his sword became increasingly powerful. By realizing he wanted more, he managed to strike the enemy with precision. Suddenly, the spear pierces the girl's arm. Protecting his friend, he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Irritated, the girl wants to know who that figure in front of her was. Meanwhile, the spear continues destroying her body. Scarlet listens attentively to her companion's words. With blood all over his face, he says his name is Lee Sunman. At that moment, an arrow hits the girl. Revealing her name, she says she is A. With the spear in hand, he does not lower his guard. After being hit, a bit of blood comes from the girl's mouth, and her body is also wounded. Suddenly, she turns and begins to flee. After the intense battle, the warrior is extremely tired. A piece of wood can be seen. When he opens his eyes, Lee Summon is lying in a bed. At his side, Scarlet is attentively reading a book, saying he was lucky not to have died. She says he passed out for about 3 days and they were at a nearby village. She had called a doctor and used a potion on the boy's external wounds. When he says he can move without problems, she is shocked by the brat since he had broken several bones. Apparently, his fractured bones recovered in just 3 days. That could also be an effect of the Black Heart. Confused, Scarlet starts to observe him more intently. She asks if there was something he was hiding. Also, she wants to know who that monster child was since it seemed like he knew something, asking him not to hide anything. She demands answers. However, the warrior remains silent in his place. After telling everything to Scarlet, the girl understands why he kept meeting that psychopath Zhang Yun. Her friend had been through hell and obtained a piece of mana containing incredible powers. Even so, she says he's very lucky to have such a strong companion like her capable of helping him. Noticing his reaction, she says she wants to receive a big thank you. At that moment, the protagonist becomes curious as to why the girl didn't run away. The situation was life or death, but the child was only after Lee Summon. Therefore, Scarlet could have fled at any moment, but that character couldn't bear to let him die alone in that place. As she stands up, she says she didn't want to do that at the time. She put some distance between herself and the boy. While thinking, she asks if he had ever experienced war. Choosing her words carefully, she takes a little time. She says that when she was young, before being as hot as she is now, she didn't know when or where the war began. The girl says that war was a brutal thing capable of taking away everything most precious, even the village where she grew up. All the precious people that mattered to her had disappeared. Lee Summon watches her outburst closely. For her, it was hard to get used to the sense of loss and she preferred never to get close to anyone. Finally, she says she couldn't have left him alone since everything happened right in front of her. Looking at the hero's expression, she asks if he had ever lost someone. Sitting there, he doesn't say a word. Smiling, she says not to worry about unnecessary things and that her friend wasn't dead. She had survived war and all sorts of trouble up to that moment, having some really good luck. Besides, she didn't even get the chance to use her secret technique to defeat the girl. Scarlet knew the boy would prefer to travel alone out of fear of losing the people around him. Therefore, if he didn't want to lose important people, he should get stronger. As she points at him, she says he should become strong enough to never have to get into a situation like that again. Smiling, the voice says he already knew that. By the end of the conversation, he was feeling much better. Asking to rest a little more, Scarlet leaves, saying they would depart for Brendan the next day. He thanks her for the help. He thinks about that situation as his friend walks away. Holding his weapon, he decides that he will become stronger. Suddenly, his memories take him back to the previous night. At that final moment, what came from his spear was a reinforced energy. Therefore, the protagonist didn't need to think about trivial things. As energy bursts from his sword again, he is determined to keep getting stronger. The red-haired girl says that she finally and celebrates that they arrived in the city of Brendan. Excited, she says it's her first time in the central district city and celebrates that they weren't attacked like last time. Without stopping talking, the young woman asks Lee what they're going to do first, and the boy says he hasn't decided yet. Then she suggests they rest a bit and take the opportunity to eat something. Upon arriving in a building, the two are welcomed. Sitting at the table, the dude discusses what they should eat, but the protagonist isn't sure. Thoughtfully, the red-haired girl says she's never eaten anything from the central district before, and that's why she's unsure. Besides that, she says she doesn't know how to deal with flies in the place. There are two men watching and Lee notices, asking Scarlet if she noticed too. The boy says that the moment they entered the restaurant, the two men scan them from head to toe. The girl asks why they are doing that, and Lee says it's probably because of him, leaving the girl confused. Then he explains that when a martial artist reaches the supreme level, they achieve origin reversal and other people can't see the energy they have. While Lee Sunman achieved one of the requirements to be a supreme martial master, he hasn't fulfilled the others. Scarlet then concludes that the protagonist's inner energy is overflowing and that's why it attracted those flies. Hearing the conversation, a man questions the word flies he just heard. He says the girl has a sharp tongue and asks if that's what makes her more charming. Irritated, she asks what the hell the man is talking about and what's in his head. Laughing awkwardly, the guy says that, as expected, beautiful flowers have forms, but the girl tells him to shut up. Scarlet says she's begging him to stop talking and focus on eating, and that every word he says only increases her desire to kill him. Lee says the man got really angry for being confronted. Before they could react, the guy grabs a sword and says he'll give the girl a chance to take back what she said, but she says she won't take it back and asks what he's going to do, calling him an idiot. Furious, the guy jumps toward the dude wielding the sword, and the young woman asks her friend Summon to save her. Analyzing the opponent, the protagonist says he seems to be a first-class martial artist. The opponent attacks while the young man tries to figure out exactly how to get out of that situation. Suddenly, another person appears and questions how someone can be so rude in an inn, and also have such poor judgment besides attacking head-on an opponent who is much stronger. While he talks, the man who tried to attack falls to the ground and is knocked out. Observing the scene, Summon realizes that the knockout happened using a coin. The guy who just arrived apologizes for interfering and introduces himself as Namban Haiwan. Scarlet asks if he's part of the clan that has many strong martial artists. Lee says he had no intention of killing the opponent. Then Wan says he'd like to join the duo at their table and asks if it's okay. They all look at each other, confused. Some asks why they're looking at him and the newcomer asks how old the young man is. He replies that he's 18 years old, surprising Namung as he's already close to being a peak supreme martial artist. Still surprised, he says the protagonist is incredibly talented and asks if perhaps he is the little celestial demon Wui Hoyan, making the young man spit out his coffee. The man keeps talking and says that's the only monster he can think of that could reach that martial arts level at such a young age. They asks if the guy knows the little celestial demon, and he replies, yes, after all he's famous. Besides that, there are only 3 martial artists called celestial demons in area. The bloodthirsty Bakuan, the berserker Bakui, and the little demon Wui Hoyan. And he says there's a rumor that the celestial demon is a woman. Then he decides to ask all at once who exactly the protagonist is. He introduces himself as Lee Sunman, and Namung says he's never heard of him. Curious, the boy asks what else the guy knows about the little celestial demon, and he says he already told everything, and that if he wants to know more details, he'll have to ask around. Then Huan asks to fight Summon. The proposal surprises the boy and the guy says he has no bad intentions, and that he just feels competitive when facing a strong martial artist. Lee says that if it's a friendly fight, he accepts and the answer makes the martial artist happy. However, he makes another proposal and says that just fighting is boring, suggesting they bet something thoughtfully, and the protagonist asks if he wants to bet something, and the guy says something not too serious, and he suggests that the loser becomes the winner's brother. After accepting the fight, the two men go to a battle center and decide to begin the duel. Summon says he doesn't know if he'll be able to meet the expectations of his new friend, but he laughs and says the young man is too humble. Analyzing the opponent, the protagonist notices that the energy around him has completely changed. Then he concludes that his opponent is quite strong and is at least at the level of a peak martial artist. Or maybe he is a peak supreme martial artist. Both prepare for the battle between them and Namong makes a few movements. Lees that there are some strange moves being made, but decides not to be dazzled so as not to lose his rhythm. He performs the Shadowless Soulflight Strike first form, but is surprised as the opponent destroy the Illusory movements with great speed. The battle between them continues and Huan tries to land another blow, claiming he's enjoying the situation. He uses an energy absorption technique, leaving the boy a bit anxious. To defend himself, the protagonist chooses to use the Spear of the Nine Supreme Heavens, first form with a soul, chasing lethal strike. The fact that the opponent moved his sword in the middle of an attack is impressive. Naman explains that if the attack had been made with a real spear, it would have been much more intense and that he would be in danger if he were messing around, and that he doesn't intend to call someone younger than him. Summon says that in the first place, the bet is no longer in his favor, and that he wouldn't lose anything by losing the bet. While Scarlet watches, the opponent asks if the young man is still going to give it his all since martial artists don't like to lose. Both decide to continue with the attacks in the fight. After launching a powerful blow, Lee says that the opponent is trapped, but he manages to break free, and the protagonist says he doesn't want to admit, but the opponent's energy control is better than his. So, he decides to use his internal energy to push the opponent away. The power of the Spear of the Nine Supreme Heavens is unleashed. Many movement images begin to appear to deceive the opponent's eyes. Lee knows that even though many images appear, there is only one real one, and he needs to find and face it. However, Nambong overpowers the boy and declares that he won the duel. With a sword to his neck, Submin says that he lost, but he knows he still has a long journey ahead. Laughing, Huan says the boy was very skilled in their fight, and that the difference in skill between them isn't that big, and that the boy's spear technique is incredible, but that the advanced techniques weren't very effective, and that he believes the young man hasn't had many chances to use them against martial masters. He goes on to say that the boy still isn't used to controlling internal energy, and that because of this, he's taking more damage from smaller attacks. In conclusion, the guy says he's saying this from experience, and that the young man can quickly fix these problems by fighting more. Namung says that now that they're brothers, he hopes the young man can go with him to a place, the Skull Temple. Surprised, Lee says he was actually heading there. Near the location, Scarlet hears the conversation between the two, says they're noisy, and asks if the fight is over. Seeing the two laughing, she asks what's wrong with them and says she doesn't like it. Far from there, an old man sitting and meditating says he can feel it and that something is coming. He claims it's the omnipotent god of chaos approaching. They say that's why Nambong Huan is going to visit the Shaolin Temple. But he says he always visits the temple at this time of year to see Master Abbot Bullion. His friend says he also does that together with the other generations of the other 3 great clans, and that he does it because of a promise from a long time ago, but that he'll explain at another time. Thus, the trio went together to the Shaolin Temple. They talk about the 4 great clans Naaman, Jajal, Moyang, and Tang, and that the heirs are more or less the same age, while the patriarchs of those clans already tried to unify all of them into one great clan. However, when they finally tried to make it work, they began to question who should be the leader. Due to arguments, they decided to leave the decision for the next generation, and Shaolin Abbot Master Bullion would be the judge, also being responsible for deciding who would be the leader among the heirs chosen by each clan. Arriving at the place, he greets those at the temple and says he was late because he had to take care of some things first. Observing, Lee realizes that everyone there is famous and well known from his past life. Meanwhile, Tang asks if the protagonist was the reason for Nambong's delay. He scolds the girl and asks who she thinks she is to call him that guy. Then he introduces Lee as his little brother and a martial master close to reaching the supreme martial peak before the age of 20. The girl asks how such a skilled martial artist is the guy's brother, but then she understands that this is a plan to raise his status among the rising stars of each clan. Then Lee realizes what happened and asks if that's why he won a brother. The man agrees. Besides, for the protagonist to say he's the guy's brother is no problem at all. Jajal interrupts and asks how long the two are going to keep stalling. Turning to the group, Piwan says he's going to visit Master Bulling and that his friend can rest a bit in the meantime. As they leave the place, Scarlet says she wishes she were the friend, since even after losing the fight, he still came out on top. A man approaches, calls the two over, and says he prepared meals for them, and both hope the temple food is still delicious. Sitting and eating, Scarlet says there's no meat in the food, and the protagonist says, of course, after all, they don't eat that here. Immersed in his thoughts, Lee thinks that all he needs to do is get the secret scroll and return it to Drammer. He is interrupted by a man who enters the room and receives the information that the abbot would like to speak with him. Following the man, the protagonist is confused about what is happening and doesn't understand why the master wants to speak with him. Summon thinks that he doesn't know much about Master Bulling, even in his past life, but he knows the nickname very well, and it's eccentric Buddha. Upon arriving at the place, the man asks if the boy is adored by the omnipotent god of chaos. Lee doesn't understand and asks if that's Master Bullion and what he means by the omnipotent god of chaos, and asks the man to explain better what that means. But the old man says it's impossible because if he explained, he would either die or be purged from the physical plane and become a god in the heavens. Driven by curiosity, Salman asks where he needs to go to get the answer he seeks. Something happens and the young man doesn't understand what it is. Then he is ordered to go north within 5 years to the place where the eternal snow never melts, and there he will find someone extremely important. After the old man returns to normal, Lee asks what that was that he did, but the master dodges the question. He says it wasn't him who did it, but the spirit that resides in his body. Some men ask if he's a servant of Buddha, but carries a spirit within him, and the old man laughs, saying that's exactly why they call him the eccentric Buddha. But he says he doesn't know why the spirit spoke to the boy through his body, only that some questions were answered. Continuing the conversation, the man asks if the young man came to return a secret scroll, and he agrees, laughing. The old man says the boy must have thought he gets something in return, and that's why he came to return it. And then he gives him a superior circulation elixir. Lee is ecstatic with the gift and can't believe it. The Buddha says the boy is making a fuss and that he's just like how Wujihoyan described him. Some ask what name the old man just said, but he says the protagonist heard it clearly. Then the boy asks if Ouija was around there, but again the man avoids the question, while the boy begs him to tell what he knows. Noticing the young man's desperation, the Buddha begins to speak. An image appears behind Lee. Is the future Jai Hack and they are ordered to battle. And then the old man will say what he knows. The protagonist is shown fallen on the ground and says he lost. He remembers people saying that even after training for years, he still keeps losing in a pathetic state. The young man says he can't say anything, not even to the voices in his head. Lee thinks that he lost an am, but at least he managed to have a duel. While against Ji-Hack, it was as if he were being made a fool of, and he had never even heard the man's name in his past life. The Buddha asks Hack what he thought of the opponent, and the man replies that the boy still has much to learn, concluding that the young man still needs more experience, even though he has good spear techniques, adding that he also doesn't seem to know how to control his internal energy properly, and because of that, he can't manage large amounts of internal energy. Touching the boy, the Buddha says that's why his internal energy will be unbalanced, annoyed. The boy asks what the old man is doing, and he says the brat should just let him do it already, with a piece of wood tied to his foot. The old man orders the protagonist to walk, but he can't. Then the Buddha says it's hard to move like that, and that's the current state of the boy's body. They explain the difference between intellect, energy, and physique, and that even if the boy has an advanced intellect, the energy is trapped in his body. Thoughtfully, Lee believes that his energy increased because he used elixirs and his intellect as well, because he learned to transfer energy to the weapon. The Buddha continues his lesson to the boy using the stick tied to his leg as a way to teach him something. Eager to learn, some asks how he can fix this imbalance between intellect and energy in his body, and understands that he'll need to undergo a body restructuring, and that this would probably be the easiest way. Decided, the old man says that Jahak will help the protagonist with martial arts. Thinking, the Buddha says that if he left the boy like that, he would suffer, and that goes against Buddhist practices, and that besides that a child he likes asked him to help when he arrived there, referring to Wujihoyan. Later, some hack are walking, and the golden man asks what the boy was thinking about after the fight. The protagonist says he believes he's become a little stronger, and that he managed to reach the martial peak after years of training and hard work, and also recently learned to do something incredible. But even so, he lost to him, and to Nambong he won. Hack asks if a newcomer isn't being a bit too hasty and says it's rare for people to reach that level at 18 years old. In his opinion, he says the young man just had bad luck having them as opponents, and that he is called the future Shaolin, even though he still has a lot to learn. Lee concludes that his starting line compared to Hack's is completely different, but the man continues and says he couldn't defeat the little celestial demon. Surprised, someone asks if the new friend has fought her before, and the man says yes when she came to the temple. Curious, he asks why Wiji Hoyin came there and that it sounded like pure arrogance from a 17-year-old girl. However, no one was able to reprimand her since the girl's presence was so overwhelming that people simply accepted her request. Hack says the result of his duel with Wiji was shocking and that he literally couldn't do anything, losing in a much worse way than the opponent he had that day. Doubtful, Lee asks how strong Wiji Hoyin might be now, and the man says he can't say precisely, but he believes she has already surpassed the supreme martial peak. Curious, Hack asks what someone's relationship is with her, and the boy says they're just friends and that his only goal is to reach her level. Then Hack says now he understands the boy's urgency, concluding that what the boy lacks most is experience, but over time he'll be able to fix that, advising him. The man says that the young one will still face many defeats and despair before he reaches her, but he'll be ready. Lee says he's already used to despair, especially feeling desperate, but even so, it's not easy to get back up. That he thought he was finally catching up to the girl, but he's still far from getting there. And while he was still crawling, Wui Hoyin had already flown far ahead. Determined, he begs to be allowed to fight Hack again. Later, the protagonist appears with a swollen face and says he plans to stay a little longer at the Shaolin Temple. Upon meeting Scarlet and Han, the two don't recognize the boy and ask who he is. Then upon finding out their friend fought Jaehak, Nimong is stunned. He says that Master Bowling has gone senile and didn't let him fight the man when he asked. Curious, Subman says that even though his opponent is strong, he's never heard of him and wants to know more information. He explains that even though the 4 clans are known throughout, they are still weaker than the 10 great sects. Then he explains about the 3 main rising stars of the Orthodox sect being Chugal, Chung, and Jihak as the leaders. He also explains that all the sect leaders are focused on training their disciples, and they are the secret weapons that should never leave their sects. Nambong asks that his friend will stay at the temple and says he wanted to introduce him to his clan, but Lee says he'll get in touch with his brother about it later. Scarlet says that if the boy is going to stay there, then she will also have to say goodbye. Not understanding, the protagonist asks where his friend is going, and she says she doesn't have a destination in mind. She's just going to travel. The young woman says she liked the place, but doesn't know how staying there would help her. Tickling her friend, she asks if he's sad about being separated from his great friend then. Speaking seriously, she asks why Lee tries so hard since he trains every day and still keeps getting beaten. She asks if the boy will survive without her. Then she puts a bracelet on the boy's arm and says the object is connected to her soul and that no matter where he is, whenever she wants to see him, the bracelet will send a signal, and that she also gave the item to Bako. Before leaving, the girl says her friend should train a lot so that next time he'll be the one to save her. Watching the scene, Namboom wonders why things like that never happened to him. The next day, both Scarlet and Juan say their goodbyes, but before they leave, Lee calls out to his friend, asking why she's so kind to him. Not understanding much, the young woman gets a bit tired of that topic again. She says that they've already talked about this before, but since her friend is so worried, she'll tell him again. Scarlet says that for some reason, the boy caught her attention since they first met, and that she usually doesn't try to get close to people, but she became interested in the young man. However, after traveling with him, she realized the boy is really nice, concluding that she always feels like cheering for him when she sees him working hard. The girl says she likes to tease him and notices that her friend is very sincere and also very handsome. Laughing a lot, Lee asks if something bitter, leaving her confused about what's going on, but she finishes by asking Sunman not to live like a weakling and that he must always walk with his head held high. The young man agrees with her. Later, Lee focuses on his preparation and says he has decided that while at the temple, he won't use the spear or the demonic armor, and that he will leave behind his weak mentality and equipment. He also decides to set aside the superior circulation elixir that Master Bullion gave him. He remembers the Buddha's instruction saying he will find a person of extreme importance in the place where the snow never melts. Thinking, Lee remembers that he and Wiji Hoyin agreed to meet in 6 years. Sman says that the important person from the prophecy is definitely Bakogo. But knowing he only has 5 years, he wonders how far he'll be able to get by then. Jae-hak approaches and asks if the protagonist abandoned the spear and armor and why. The boy responds that it would be inappropriate to use those tools during training. Hak explains that martial arts are a study about how to use the body, but what really controls it is the heart. He continues saying that the heart fills your body and becomes the necessary energy. He asks the boy to pay attention to what a Skalin is like and to experience it for himself. Lee thinks he still hears the sounds of Sikkis and that this noise is stuck in his ears. But before he leaves, he will try to resolve that issue. While fighting, Hak says the boy's basic fundamentals are impressive, and that it's clear how hard he worked to reach that level. However, the spear style he learned, although advanced, seems a bit sloppy. The boy says it's like that because he ran away and that no matter how much he trained, he couldn't improve anymore. So, if he ran away and focused on simpler and easier techniques to learn, Hak says that if someone could become an advanced martial artist using only triple sword techniques, there would be no reason to learn advanced techniques. They continue battling while talking during some moments. Lee says that's why he will never run away again. His friend explains that the path of martial arts is infinite, and the duty is to discover what weakness can still be improved. He says the young man is not a genius and that true geniuses had already flown while the boy was still crawling. He instructs the boy that he must not despair or let despair take over. Hak says he thought he was flying, but after seeing the little celestial demon, he realized he wasn't even close to flying. Confused, some ask what he, as an insect on the ground, is supposed to do, and that for now all he can do is crawl. Reflective, the protagonist thinks that Wijihoyen and Bakogo weren't very good at teaching because they could only teach from a genius point of view, concluding that Jae-hak is a better teacher since from birth he was taught by countless monks learning more than 72 different martial arts. While he tries to attack Hak, he gets punched in the mouth and the man says the boy's senses are confused. Besides that, he's still not used to energy circulation and needs to improve that. After all, the boy's understanding ability is still weak and for that reason, he needs to work even harder. Lee says that on that day he realized how insignificant he was, but he didn't run away. He continued training the Supreme Spear of the Nine Heavens as if there were no tomorrow. He also trained his internal energy circulation, but it didn't go well. After all, it was difficult. He worked on his 5 senses and finally managed to balance them. Sunmin says that whenever he felt that way, he trained even more. Time passed and so did the seasons. He was never able to surpass Jack, not even once, so he decided to observe the Shaolin and learn from him. Watching, the protagonist thinks that the world is immense and he is tiny, and that he wants to be in the sky flying, seeing everything from up above in the vast world. Someone approaches, interrupts the young man's thoughts and asks if he'll be able to get out of the well or not. It's Master Bulling arriving to speak with the young man. He says that Lee is different now, surprising the boy. The Buddha says that with martial arts, the boy could live peacefully inside the well, but asks what his real goal is. Summon says he wants to see the world, and the old man says anyone can do that. Levin says he wants to fly and see the world from above. Bullyoung says that's quite an ambition, and that he's far too small to talk about that. The protagonist continues saying he wants to dream, but flying isn't a dream. Questioning him, the master asks what the young man has learned over the past 6 months, and he replies that he has learned how to crawl the right way. After saying that it's a good start, the old man says it's time to learn how to walk. Time passed and Lee has now been at the temple for over a year. Now the young man is 20 years old and has decided to ask Jae-hak a question. He asks why helping isn't a burden. The protagonist says one of his biggest flaws is being weak, even though he's become stronger through training. Summon says that helping him probably doesn't contribute much to Hak's growth as a martial artist, but the man replies that he doesn't understand why the boy thinks that way, since the duels between them were very helpful. He continues saying that thanks to those confrontations, he was able to review everything he had already learned, and that there are no limits to what can be learned, as he aims for a much higher place in life, asking if the boy doesn't share the same dream. After the answer, it started to dawn on Lee why he had asked such a question. He thought that maybe he was still stuck in his past life. That's why he still doubted people who were kind to him. Despite everything that had happened, he was still afraid to move on to face certain situations. But he still thought that all the kindness others showed him was because of some unknown charm. Upon hearing Hak's question about the dream, the boy became pensive. He said that now his true goal was not to get better at martial arts, nor to be recognized by Oji Hoyen, but instead to stop running away from himself. Approaching the master, the protagonist asks what more he knows about the blessing mentioned earlier. The old man says that he finally found the courage to ask about that subject. Lee recalls the first time he saw Master Balang and asked about the being who was helping him. Then he reflects on whether he had been asking not about the being itself, but about the effects of the blessing. The Buddha says it's been 2 years since the boy arrived at the temple and asks why he's asking about that now. Sman says he was afraid to face the truth that it used to haunt him, but now he doesn't want to run away anymore. Buliang says he liked that expression on the boy's face and says that among the many effects of the blessing, there is one that makes others feel more compassion for you, but that this blessing only changes the way others see the boy. The statement confuses him, and then the master explains that basically this blessing only helps if people's first impression of him. If people don't like the boy, they would abandon him. With that, he concludes that all the relationships he's built so far are genuine. Lee thanks him, and the old man says that if he wants, he can remove the effect of the blessing, and from then on no one will have a good first impression of the boy. That way he could form honest connections without feeling guilty. Listening carefully, the boy says he accepts that option. Sometime later, Sman reunites with Huan, and the man asks if he's decided to become a monk, but he makes a little joke saying that so far he still has hair. Since it's been a long time since they last saw each other, Namung suggests they get together for a drink and then throws an object toward his brother, telling him to think fast. The boy manages to catch the object but says it was a mean prank. Huan says his friend has gotten stronger over time and congratulates him for reaching the supreme peak. Then he says that Lady Moan married Jajalarium and had also said she didn't like how arrogant and loud Namung was. After that, the man began to train like crazy to forget his heartbreak and reach the supreme peak. The man also says that even so, he's still not satisfied and asks how things have been for his friend, asking if he liked training at the temple. Lee says he liked the time he spent there. Analyzing his brother, Nambong says he's changed a lot. He once says he no longer feels that strange sensation he had when he first saw his friend. But thinking about it, ever since they met, he felt something strange in his heart and even thought he might be homosexual for feeling something for his brother. Their conversation continues normally. Another year passed, and when Lee turned 22, he left the temple. An old man holds an object, while asking the protagonist to deliver the letter to the leader of the Manwha sect in Drawer. Summon received a mission and was lucky that his destination was Moor, since the temple of the temple god was located there. Thawfoldy wonders if the power of prophecy might have been used. In that case, he decides to call for Neville. At that very moment, the agent appears asking what his master needs. The protagonist was looking to buy some information. He wanted to know about the Phantom Sword Dak Jun, Bakogo the Lightning. He also wanted information about Oijahoyan, a little celestial demon. Regarding Bakobo, she's been doing good deeds and missions to help the needy. Thanks to that, she ended up becoming a bit famous, and it's been a week since she was last in the great city of Rubes. As for the Phantom Sword Dapi Jun, he's been spreading his name through challenges. He's on a journey seeking duels against martial artists from prestigious sects, and has even gone to the Mount Hu sect. Looking into the crystal ball, the protagonist reflects on what he just heard. Since his destination was also Drymore, he might meet the man on the way. However, there was still the matter of the information on the little celestial demon. Eagerly awaiting Neville's answers, Summon puts a smile on his face. Oji Hoyan has gathered some followers due to her great strength and charisma. In total, there are 20 followers, but all of them are at least at the martial peak or above. So many groups are on alert. For example, the Blood Celestial Demon, Bak Musion, is the governor of the northernmost region. Woi Hoyan's group is marching north toward his territory, and they are about to face off. Neville says he believes that the Blood Celestial Demon who has ruled the area for a long time has a better chance of winning the battle. Despite his certainty, the hero disagrees. For him, the victory will be Wui's. While sitting, he continues looking at the crystal ball. He thinks it's already been 8 years since he last saw Wu Hoyan. Embarrassed, he realizes how beautiful she had become. After a while, he realizes that his thoughts were getting weird. He had never met the little celestial demon and the blood celestial demon before returning. Moreover, Woi Hoyan disguised herself as a man in her past life, but now she was openly walking around as a woman. In this life, even her personality might be different. Worried, he thinks about the battle against the blood celestial demon. His will is to go north and help her right away. However, they could only meet again in 2 years. He remembers the words of the girl who told him to make her his goal. Because of the promise they made, she would always be his goal. Therefore, he needed to continue what he was doing, and was certain the girl would resolve the battle and wait for him at the peak. Confident, he needed to keep his promise to become stronger. While walking through the forest, he began to have other kinds of thoughts. The protagonist felt as if he had already broken one of his promises. Meanwhile, Wiji Hoyen touches her body with one of her hands. In the end, she realizes that her breasts hadn't grown as big as she wanted. A voice calls out to her asking if she's already awake. A man says it would be better for her to rest a bit longer. Turning to him, she asks him not to call her miss since she doesn't consider any of them her subordinates. She wouldn't stop them from following her, but they shouldn't expect anything from her. Thus, the two continue walking side by side. The girl notices that everyone is looking at her with intrigued gazes. She hated those looks full of expectations and remembers the people who looked at her when she was the young master of the demonic cult. Missing summon, she says she could kill all those Dan worms. However, someone asks if she is the little celestial demon. Bank Musion appears in front of her saying the girl seemed full of energy to fight him. She replies by saying she'd like to know how strong her fellow blood celestial demon is. Placing one of her hands on her chin, she realizes her colleague was very unlucky to be the only one found so easily by her. Noticing the girl's arrogance, Backmusen wonders if she has enough skill to defeat him. Before the fight begins, she shows unusual curiosity by asking with which hand he held his fork, but it was just a provocation, warning that she would leave that hand intact. In the Manwha sect, the low vegetation covers some parts of the place. One of the guards asks what the protagonist's purpose was for entering that place. Holding something in his hands, he says he needed to deliver a letter sent by Master Bullion. The guard apologizes for his ignorance and accompanies him to the sect leader's quarters. After completing his mission, the protagonist needed to find the god of time denier. However, a character calls out asking if he was the boy from the Mercy Mountains. That was Dabi Jun, and the protagonist recognized him immediately. Happy to be recognized, he starts talking to the man who says he would never forget the things that happened on that mountain. He explains it was the period in his life when he suffered the most and would remember everything until the day he died. Even so, he doesn't understand how he was recognized so easily since he was under the vision prohibition at the time. The old man explains he remembered the internal energy the boy exuded. Enjoying the conversation, the two continue face to face until Daki Jun asks the young man to go resolve his matters in the sect. That way they could talk more later. Impatient, the sentinels wait for him with looks of fury on their faces. The boy walks away and the old man remains seated on that rock, leaning on his sword. He seems very thoughtful about something strange. His hands appear to tremble incessantly as he holds the sword's hilt. He kneels down, realizing something strange within his body. A monster appears behind him, that child created by the Lich Preskin. Inside the Manwha sect, a person says, "It is a pleasure to meet the colleague." Page Shat introduces himself as the sect leader. Lee Summon also introduces himself saying he came to do a favor for Master Bullion. While handing over the letter, the man says the leader of the Murma Alliance has renounced his position, so Master Bullion would now be a leader. Upon opening the letter, he realizes the elder had declined his proposal. Throwing the piece of paper behind him, he says he already knew the old man would do that. Changing the subject, he says the disciples who brought the protagonist to his room mentioned that the boy knows the ghost sword. Stating they met earlier, he says the boy was sitting right in front of the sect's entrance. Sangha says that the ghost sword wanted to jewel him, that the sage had no intention of doing that. Curious, the hero asks why. As a martial artist, he enjoyed fighting strong people and didn't mind accepting duels. However, the ghost sword is very dangerous. Returning to talk with Dapi Jun, the young man starts the conversation. He asks if it was true that he used dark magic. Laughing, the old man asks if Sangha had told the boy that. After confirming he used dark magic, the boy becomes curious, thinking he only knew sword techniques. The man asks if he had ever reached the limit before, and Summon confirms. Although the boy was too young to say he had reached his limit at any point, he realizes he's getting old. He says that even if he used internal energy to slow aging, it would still be possible to feel strength slipping through his fingers. Confused, he realizes the boy has no idea what it feels like to experience that kind of despair. Having to rely on dark magic and throw away all his pride as a martial artist was desperate. Showing his shame, the old man remains silent. In the end, he orders the boy to get out of his sight. He didn't want him to see that side of him at all. Smun decided to leave silently since he wasn't in a position to say anything and preferred to leave it alone. He went looking for Daner's temple, which Mercy had mentioned, and stopped in front of a shack. Upon entering the house, he saw the god of time Dare. He was very confused to realize that it was just a simple child. Confused, the boy asks if the protagonist was sent by Mercy after realizing he was quite problematic. Probably he had crossed the boundaries of time to be in that place. As expected of a god, Daner was able to sense that right away. With a more formal introduction, he says he is the god of time, and that's why certain things were obvious to him. Naturally, Dare would feel uncomfortable near someone who had broken the rules of time, like the hero who disturbed the flow of the world. Not understanding his words, the warrior asks what he meant by that. For not living this life as if it were his last, doing the same things, eating the same food, meeting the same people. The god explains that each small change made could cause an even bigger one, like a snowball effect. Luigi stopped dressing like a man and ended up facing the blood celestial demon, which never happened in the past life. Furious, Daner states that the mere fact of his existence was enough to distort that world. Moreover, there were many differences in events which would continue increasing more and more with no foreseeable end. His mere existence was distorting the order of the world. The protagonist says he chose to return when he awakened something inside himself. Even when asked, a god of time wouldn't tell him anything. The gods are neither omniscient nor omnipotent. If you enjoyed listening, leave a like, comment, and hit the bell for more. Thanks for listening.